Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. And that is a quote from The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which I'm sure everyone hearing this has previously heard of. But it relates to real estate too. And when it comes to real estate and negotiations, what I've personally seen over 20 years completely mirrors that sentiment, and that rigid tactics lose. And if you're not flexible in how you engage with your counterparties, you often are costing your client real money. And that's part of reading the room and adapting to your specific counterparty and your client, of course, as well as the unique situation. And almost every single one of these deals I've done over this 2 decades have had a unique aspect to it. There are general rules of thumb, but boy, if you're not adaptable and can't advise your client on a changing situation, you really can cost them the deal, or cost them tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on which side you're on. And the other quote that I think is really relevant from Sun Tzu is that every battle is won before it's ever fought. And that's particularly relevant to our Tales from the Trenches this week, where we talk about some bidding wars that we were part of 3 different houses this past weekend. And the core idea here is that before you're in negotiations, you should really have a deep understanding of the market. You should know the comps. In some cases, you might be able to discern the seller's motivation. Of course, the price history of the house and days on market are also very important, but also the general desirability of that property type and price range. All of that can affect your strategy in whether or not to offer and how much to offer, as well as other contingencies within the contract. So it's nice to reflect on Sun Tzu. It's sort of a cliche in business circles is to look at Sun Tzu, but I've never done it in the real estate world on this podcast, and I thought, why don't we do a little Sun Tzu, especially given some of the other stuff happening in the world right now.
I was going to say that second quote, the every battle is won before it's ever fought, TBD on that, but I think that also has a truth to it too.
You're talking about Iran.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, welcome to the House Einstein podcast. This is House Einstein podcast 111. I'm Osman Parvez, and with me is Hamish Crabb. We are your hosts for the House Einstein podcast, and let's dive into our table of contents. But before we do, let me just remind you of our little disclaimer, and that is this podcast is entertainment. If you are a client of the brokerage, please pick up the phone and call your House Einstein agent. Even though House Einstein sponsors the podcast, and the mission of the brokerage is to help you make a smarter real estate decision, we only do that in direct communication with you. If you're enjoying this podcast, we hope you're entertained, and maybe you'll learn something along the way, but please do not make any major real estate decisions, financial decisions, spiritual, relationship decisions, anything that could affect your life. Don't do it on the basis of what you hear in this pod.
We're not your guys.
And if you do, well, don't blame us. Okay. Our attorneys like how this changes a little bit every time, but that's the essential disclaimer. Okay. Well, Hamish, should we talk about what's in this week's table of contents?
Absolutely. We have a fairly loaded, maybe in topic, but also in quantity, amount of topics to cover today at the podcast. A decent amount of news. Always the sales of the week, and some solid tales of the trenches, and a closing table topic. You're gonna go and do the gloss, but I'm just hyping slightly.
Well, every week it feels like you think we're talking about too much, but somehow magically we end up keeping it to under 2.5 hours, usually under 2.
Yeah. No, I'm get the listener excited. We're loaded with topics, and we hope yeah.
Loaded with topics. Loaded, I think, means something different to my generation than yours.
It's like tension loaded, right? Like salaciousness, kind of. Yeah, that's what.
Loaded is usually when you're inebriated and you're like tripping all over yourself, sloppy at the bar. That's loaded in my mindset. But all right, let's go through the table of Not that. All right, let's go through our table of content, and before we lose you, dear listeners, into our banter. Our core topic is a segment we call the closing table, and this week we're going to be talking about the golden handcuffs. And if you're not familiar with that term, you will be by the end of the pod. We're going to talk about what it is and how you can navigate the golden handcuffs and why it's impacting the real estate market in such a significant way. In our Tales from the Trenches, we've got two stories, both of which are hot off the presses, one of which involves Zillow and why you should probably never trust it, and the other involves timing when it comes to real estate negotiations in the current market and how to balance social proofs and discipline when it comes to making a move on a house you might want to buy. Mm-hmm. Market conditions is our next segment, and in the market conditions segment, we're going to talk about whether you should consider buying now. We're going to cover Denver market conditions, including a recent article from the Post, and we're going to talk about the Boulder market as well with the most recent available data, which is through the end of February. Sales of the week, we have 5 properties we're going to talk about. Hopefully we get through all 5. 2586 3rd Street, 1450 High Street, 3080 7th Street, 4445 Grinnell Avenue, and 2815 11th Street. And I think all of these are actually in the city of Boulder. Our footprint does extend all the way to Denver, but I really like talking about my fair city, and it's where I personally do most of my real estate transactions. So city of Boulder gets most of my attention when clients aren't dragging me else. Rightfully so. When clients aren't dragging me elsewhere. Shameless self-promotion is the segment after that. That's where we talk about a buyer or seller need that we have, a client that we're working with that we would like you to know about, because maybe you as a dear listener have something up your sleeve that could benefit our clients. And then we're going to hit our news items and give you some hot takes, including a little bit of the Iran war. I think we just can't not talk about it. It's such the biggest topic of globally right now, that not talking about it is just absurd. Pretending that we don't have a take and it doesn't have an impact on real estate.
Yeah.
We have to talk about. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about the Boulder Valley comp plan, the latest draft that was just released, and some of what we're seeing as opposition to the goals of the comp plan, including Steve Pomerantz's am I saying that right? Steve Pomerantz?
That fits to what... Yeah, Pomerantz. Yep.
Pomerantz. Steve Pomerantz's latest editorial, which is currently the #1 article on the Daily Camera. And we're going to talk about what's happening with the Boulder Valley School District, including the likelihood of schools closing. It's becoming... It's no longer hypothetical. It's becoming reality, and they are... highly, I don't know what's the word, they're kind of warming us up to the reality that a bunch of local schools are going to close, which 100% has a soft launch. Float that idea, and it's going to have massive impact in neighborhoods, because the value of being able to walk your kids to the neighborhood school versus busing them or driving them to another regional school, it can't be discounted. It's a critical factor to real estate values and desirability within certain neighborhoods. So we're going to be paying a lot of attention.
I have a little footnote on that topic for Jefferson County, since that's where I'm living, and I've been getting some emails from our school board as well, so I'll be able to put a little bit of color in addition.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then our carve-outs, and I'll be talking about van life versus the real world, particularly with a nuanced focus on when you should be outsourcing and when and why most successful people are not DIYers. And Hamish, what are you talking about?
Maybe it's my generation, or there's a shelf on it, but Pokemon cards have surged in popularity, and I was maybe for a week whisked away in that popularity and the hype around it. So I'm going to talk about that.
Okay, just a week of that popularity?
I think, really, yeah. From wait for the Carveout. Okay. I would say before we jump into it, all of the links, when applicable, and sales of the week, things like that, they're all going to be linked below in the description. So if you want to click on and follow along to our topics, you can absolutely do that. We've got time codes down there for each topic of the podcast as well. So Yeah.
Excellent. And I'll add that if you like what you hear in this podcast and you want to contact us, you can find us at houseeinstein.com. We represent buyers and sellers all the way from the southern suburbs of Denver to the northern suburbs of Fort Collins and into the mountain areas. So resort towns and mountain towns, particularly in Boulder County. We are your team, your go-to team, and more than happy to advise you on buying or selling. And even if you're not in our local market and would like us to help you find a great agent, I know the questions to ask. In fact, I've just got a project to help a client look for an agent in Oakland and sell. So California's Bay Area suburb markets. We'll be looking to help him find a great agent. And I just did one in Portland a couple of months ago as well. So we frequently help our clients or friends find great realtors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we know the right questions to ask. I can tell you it's hard. It's easy for agents to bullshit randoms who don't know this industry. And it's very difficult for agents to bullshit other agents, although there is a saying about salespeople and that we love to be sold to, so keep that in mind too. But we do our best to suss them out, and Hamish, you may have to beep that.
Oh, yep. Thank you.
Yeah, please make a note on the time to cut out my profanity so we don't lose viewership. And our newsletter is also, you can also sign up for our newsletter, and that is at houseeinstein.com, so check that out. Okay, let's jump into it.
This podcast is sponsored by House Einstein. We serve buyers and sellers in Colorado, focusing on Boulder, Denver, and several mountain resort towns, including Breckenridge and Winter Park. Our mission is simple: help you make a smarter real estate decision. You can learn more at houseeinstein.com or our YouTube channel, where you'll find videos on neighborhoods, specific listings, and much, much more.
The closing table topic, golden handcuffs. Boy, if you haven't heard of golden handcuffs, I don't know where you've been. So I'm going to cover it very lightly for what this is. And that is during the immediate post-COVID period, there was a time when 2.5% to 3% mortgages had become very common. And there was a lot of activity in the housing market during that time. And now that we are significantly past COVID and rates are closer to 6%, those that own a home with those ultra low rates have a monthly payment that is very affordable compared to what it would be today. So not only have prices moved up, but rates have moved up. So often people are looking at doubling their monthly payment or more when they give up their existing home and buy another one. In fact, we were just contacted by a former client last week. Or was it this week? It was last week.
And really the inspiration for this closing table topic. Yeah,
that's true. And this is where this came from. And these clients own a great house in Martin Acres that would be a fantastic rental. And they were trying to figure out, should they sell this house and go buy another one? Because that was why they contacted us, is to figure out what is the house really worth and what are we going to net after commissions? How long is it going to take to sell? How much prep work do we need to do? And all of that is services we provide. But the first thing I did was put on my investment hat and I asked them, what's your mortgage rate? And when they told me it was like 2.7 or something like that, I was just flabbergasted that they would even consider selling. I said, you've got to figure out a way to hold on to this. Not only has the home appreciated a few $100,000, but this rate you don't have to give up. You can keep this rate if you can figure out a way to pull some of the equity out to help fund the down payment of the acquisition, the next home. You need a bigger home for your family. But this rental home that you're in now, or could be a rental
potential, yeah.
You could have tenants paying it down over the course of 15 to 20 years. And when your kids are ready for college or you have other major life expenditures, you can borrow against it at favorable rates that are tax deductible. Like, there's so many ways to use rental property. And you're also providing a really valuable service to people that need a house but aren't ready to buy a house. And small ownership, individuals owning rental properties as part of a investment strategy in their portfolio, I think is really wise. And Boulder is one of the safest markets in the country for that. So please, I don't make money to tell you this, okay? And this is what I told them. Like, this costs me money because I would love to list and sell your home. But if you want me to wear my investment advisor hat for a minute, which I think agents should be doing.
Your best interest in mind, right? Yeah.
If you could figure out a way to keep this, I would strongly advise you to explore that avenue before we list and sell the house. And so they're talking to one of our favorite lenders, and they're going to get back to us, and they're on my list of people to call. But they've got the golden handcuffs, so they felt like they couldn't move because of the rate. And there are a lot of people that are in this situation. Back in the day, there were some strategies that allowed you to creatively wrap the property. So most mortgages today... Yep, yeah. That's a little further down in the thing. So back in the day, this is probably 20, 25 years ago, maybe more than that, maybe 35 years ago, before I was even in this industry, when rates were really high, sellers would sell the home, but they would wrap the mortgage, meaning that they wouldn't notify the lender that the home had been sold. And there was no due on sale clause. So rather than pay the lender, the buyer would pay the former owner, and the former owner would pay the lender. And of course, there's some trust involved, and I'm sure there were abuses involved. But the lending industry caught on to this. They didn't like this at all. And now the vast majority of mortgages has what's called a due on sale clause. So the moment that the property is transferred from one entity to another, the lender knows about it, and they could trigger an event that would force you to pay the mortgage off, right? Yeah. The mortgage is due when it's transferred, which brings into another question about how people transfer properties to an LLC, and that doesn't trigger this. It could, but according to the lenders we know, this is very rarely coming into play. So that tells me that right? There is the possibility that you might be able to sneakily put this into an LLC where the buyer and sellers are all on the same LLC, but it involves a lot of legal risk, and that due on sale clause could really come and bite you in the butt. So we don't recommend our clients do this without talking to an attorney. Is to attempt to wrap. That's definitely
an attorney. Yeah, that's an attorney scenario through and through.
And it better not be ChatGPT. They better really know what they're doing, because the risks to you as a buyer and seller are really high. But creative financing strategies like wraps are becoming more common. And certain types of mortgages, like some VA and FHA loans, are already assumable. So that's a legal avenue to have the buyer assume the mortgage as part of the acquisition of the home. So if you happen to have a property with a VA or FHA loan and you're thinking about selling it, make sure that you're aware that you could potentially transfer that loan to the buyer, which improves the marketability of that house and maybe even results in a higher net sale price.
This is probably more of a lender question, but if you're not a veteran, can a veteran transfer their VA loan to you?
I think the answer is yes, but I'm not sure. And this brings up a good time for our disclaimer, Hamish, and that is we are not lenders. And so we would refer that type of question to our lender partners to verify rather than us verify it. But you can run it through Gemini or ChatGPT, Hamish, while we're on the pod and see what it says. I'd love to hear the answer.
Yeah, let me mute myself so I can get to clickety-clackety.
Yeah. The answer with a big asterisk, because AI is frequently wrong and frequently tells you what you want it to what you want to hear. So be really careful, and we're going to get to that a little bit further down into the pod when we start talking about the comp plan. Bridge loans
are such a smart and clever question, Hamish.
Oh no, it said that? Oh geez. Oh.
No, I'm just kidding.
You could be the sycophant, setting.
Oh, it's insane.
It's so absurd.
There's a lot of people at Tangent, but use AI as like a friend or something to that extent. And apparently there were a ton of complaints when OpenAI released GPT 5.2 because it was remade to be less sycophantic. And I guess a lot of people got really hurt by their robot friend not being as kind to them. And like I remember setting up like, please do not like stroke my ego. I don't need it, But anyway,
well, I was using Grok on voice mode. I played with voice modes on a couple of different models, and Grok's voice mode has like a seductress female voice, and this seductress female voice says things to you like, "You're so smart. That's such a great question." And how are you feeling today? It just wants to engage you in conversations. And I had it going with Leah in the car, and she looks at me and she's like, This
turn
is
this
why
off.
this is why men love AI so much. Is because that it just tells you what you want to hear. It's constantly appreciating how good looking and smart you are, and it's got a seductive-esque voice that you can tailor. And I think my understanding is Grok has even introduced adult versions of chat for that reason and charges for it. I have never done that. No need for it, but I definitely have a preference for that Grok female voice versus Claude's standard voice. Like, it's so much easier to hear that voice than this like Britishy, slightly annoying Claude voice.
And by design, right? I mean, they're designed to want you to keep using it because their numbers for investors and everything look good if you keep using it. Yeah. GPT, right. At least whenever I use it, always, here's an exam. If you want, I can show you something super relevant for real estate marketing. And then it jumps into more on the back of the VA loan. But let's not get too aside.
What was the answer on VA and FHA loans and assumability to non-VA people?
I will hit you with, it gave me 4 points. First point is that they are generally assumable. The key issue is VA entitlement. So the seller's entitlement would stay tied up in that property. They cannot.
Oh, got it. So the seller can't go use the VA loan again because their entitlement's tied up with the property that was assumed. That makes sense.
That's how it's, yeah. And then that's if the buyer is a veteran, not what I'm asking. And then assumptions why they're suddenly popular. So I guess full wraparound, I had a buddy who had a friend who was a veteran purchase a house using the VA loan for a favorable rate. And he essentially was planning on buying it off of his veteran friend down the line, but using him and paying him basically rent to cover the mortgage. That veteran died, and the family was like, well, it's in his name, so we're going to take it. You guys need to get out. Or pay up the entire principal, and you can stay and have the house. So he suddenly had to come up with a couple $100,000 to do it. But looks like he missed the fact that he could have just assumed his buddy's VA loan and had the house free and clear. Well, not free and clear, but in his name. So,
well, it just reminds me of business partnerships I've set up in the past, and where it fell apart was this succession planning. And this is in an early startup phase, but it was very clear that I didn't want to be business partners with the wife, who is now the ex-wife of this person, who I launched a business with. And we almost had a complete breakdown of our business partnership, trying to figure out how to solve that problem, how to make her a 49%, not a 50% partner, because I did not want to be business partners with her. And what was the valuation of that 49% at that time? What's the formula for deciding that? Yeah. And it was really challenging. And it almost killed. It took up like 2 weeks of potential movement in our of the startup. And this, of course, is way before AI would have helped us come up with creative solutions for that, or standards, because back then we didn't know what the standards were for business partnerships. And today it would be relatively easy to get at least some creative ideas, and maybe you draft the business partnership agreement and then have an attorney bless it before you sign it, which saves them time too. So I think it's a very interesting time, and I believe what ChatGPT is saying about VA loans, but you should always verify with a lender and maybe an attorney if you're doing this transaction between two people, and if you're doing a wrap and it's getting complex. Like, what happens if the person that's wrapping it dies, right? Like, what happens if the person who still holds the mortgage dies? There's all sorts of ways this could go sideways. But one way it can't go sideways, here's another strategy for getting out of the golden handcuffs, is that
back on track
is a bridge loan. And bridge loans are typically expensive from a rate and fee perspective, which is why people don't like them. But keep in mind, the lender needs to make money, and they're not expecting to have that money out for very long. So that's why the rate is high. That's why the fees are high. So one way to negotiate that with a potential buyer, let's say you have a stale listing and nobody's offering, and suddenly you have a buyer that's interested, but they want you to fund their cost of capital during the time period where their existing home is not sold. Keep in mind that buyer is taking the risk of two houses at this point, right? Like, they're going to keep their existing home and they're going to sell it after closing and moving into the new home. And what if that home doesn't sell, right? Now you've got a bridge loan.
You're on the hook
Probably
for some crazy, yeah.
Probably the first mortgage on that first house is probably still there, and the new home and the mortgage. So you now have 3 loans, not 2 loans, if that first house doesn't sell, because you need that first house to sell to pay back the bridge loan and the mortgage. So that's why those deals are not very popular. Bridge loans, when people look into the economics of them and think about the risks involved, they're not super excited. So sellers need to be, if you've got an old listing and it's not moving, don't be surprised if somebody wants you to help fund some of the closing costs because of the additional risks the buyer is taking.
I'd imagine those would be fairly difficult to qualify for too, considering you would be looking at taking on a bunch of debt, though maybe because it's considered temporary or thought of to be less long term. I don't know.
I mean,
not a lender.
It's the old maxim: the less you need to loan, the more happy they are to give you the money.
Yeah.
And so using capital wisely is part of an intelligent investment strategy in life. And you will find that people that could easily borrow money, like my credit score is into the 800s, I don't borrow money unless it's for real estate. Like, I'm not running around borrowing $1 million on some wacky business idea and they're happy to, every day I get messages about people trying to loan me money. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So,
never mind.
And by the way, if you're one of those telemarketers that have been texting and messaging me, you could just expect to be on
do not call list.
Expect to be blocked immediately. Well, I'm already on the do not call list, but I guess there's some business carve-outs for that. So, all right. So I think there's one more strategy, and this is one that I'm hesitant to talk about because honestly, I don't think it's a great one. And that strategy is called marry the house, date the rate.
Payment focused, right?
It's like find the right house because, hey, selection's really high. And there is some validity to that 5 years ago, even 2019, we're still not up to inventory levels of 2019. Not across the board, let me add that. But in many places, we're not up to 2019 inventory levels. But selection has improved. So the hardest thing about house shopping in Boulder has been finding a house worth buying. And suddenly you have 2 or 3 options. Take advantage of that selection and get the best one that you can get, depending on whether there's competition or not, and expect rates to drop eventually, or expect there to be a lot of inflation and your job to generate a lot more cash, right? To have your income rise. One of those 2 things are likely going to happen. And if you look in the past, that's clearly what's happened throughout time. And if you look at what our government is spending money on and intends to spend money on and continue to borrow to spend that money, inflation is almost guaranteed. So if you think, a 6% rate is horrible and you can't stomach it, at some point you're going to have more capital coming in to pay down that house faster, or you're going to have rates drop and you can refi it. At the same time, it's a strategy that takes an understanding, a macro view of economics and history and confidence in your existing job to be able to maximize the value of the selection. And most people aren't that gutsy.
It's a gutsy move. I think, historically, these 6s and 7s are fairly the norm for rates. Yes, no, I mean, maybe not.
Yeah, 6%.
Down to the number.
6 to 7% is much closer to the long-term average of mortgage rates over the last 30 years. You can see that on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's website if you want to verify it. Yep.
And then you have to consider, too, I think I know Sophie, one of the other agents on the team, was bringing this up, but when you refinance, you kind of reset your debt cycle, right? So you end up kind of paying a little bit more in interest over time as it goes, and you also have to come up with closing costs, depending on the lender, but more often than not. Again, so it's a decent bit of cash up front, and then also a little bit more cash in the long run. That's why, these golden handcuffs are called golden handcuffs because it's so cheap to finance that home that you've already got. It almost would make you sick, right? Looking at a new loan statement and seeing the total interest paid over time and comparing that to what you've currently got with your 2.7% interest rate. So it's a tricky situation. And as you said, it's not your favorite and you're hesitant to include it. I'd say none of these are like we're recommending one or the other. It's totally unique to you. And again, we're not lenders. I think my personal favorite is rent and see if you can't find, get another home. Rent out the existing. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's diversification is important, but it's also important to invest in what you know. And if you know this is a highly desirable asset in a highly desirable location, and you have it financed at a very reasonable rate, holding on to it could be a really smart move. One of my investor friends and mentors, I asked this person once if they ever regretted selling any of their properties, and they own like 30 properties, right? Like they've got actually 15. But they've bought and sold a few since I've known them. And his answer was that he regretted selling every single one of them. Every property he's ever sold, he's regretted it later. And so that tells you something. If you choose the property well, you should hold it through down periods because it really is a fantastic asset in the long run. Okay, I think it's time to move on, Hamish.
I think so too. Pretty good topic though. Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to talk about the impact of the golden handcuffs on how sellers have been really reluctant to release homes for sale and why they're so reluctant when they're sitting on this 2.5% or 3% rate, particularly if it's a good asset. But inventory has gradually been ticking upward. And selection right now, I think, is fantastic for both single-family houses and especially for condos and townhomes.
Definitely. Tales from the trenches. Kind of Zillow.
I know.
You've had 4, I guess, interactions where they like your money.
I have hired them 3 times for sure, and maybe 4, but 3 for sure. I have to be careful because Zillow is a gigantic entity with a lot of money and I'm sure quite a few lawyers. And they make you sign all sorts of agreements when you partner with them that you cannot divulge the details of. So I can't get granular in terms of what the deal was, but I will say that they offer a number of services to agents. And they also are a brokerage themselves. So what they sell is you, dear listener, your eyeballs on Zillow. Mm-hmm. They sell to agents like me. And that can be in the form of leads. It can also be in the form of showcased listings, which show up bigger on the map when you hunt for a house and get more leads and get more eyeballs. And let's just say that this is at least the 3rd time that we have engaged Zillow over 20 years, we being me. I have engaged Zillow over 20 years. And I did it very reluctantly. And then this is my personal experience. I'm not sharing any details of the deal, but I will say that, it made our client happy to show up more visibly on the map. And we get some value maybe from the 3D mapping, although you don't need to be showcased to get 3D mapping.
Yeah.
But the cost of showcasing was pretty damn expensive, but we did it for our client. And then we canceled, and Zillow is refusing to honor. Yeah. It's like one hand washing the other. Our rep says it was canceled months ago, but the credit card statement still shows the billing. And it's just been a giant frustration experience to try to detach to exit,
divorce,
get divorced from this experience. And even if even if these payments get ironed out, we still have a whole bunch of credits we're going to use. So, they could take the credits for the months that we had already canceled, but we still have a bunch of credits after that anyway. So we can't divorce them entirely. Can't quit you because we have no choice.
Yeah. And it's like this. There's this communication mismatch, and I'm not saying it's ill intent, but like we have our, what did you call him? Our agent, essentially, like our
representative,
our representative,
our account manager.
Yeah, account manager. I mean, they've been just fine, but there's a total disconnect on the billing department, and the billing department is in really good graces, it would appear, with payment services.
Yeah, well, they've got their copy paste PDF to send to the dispute center. which I gotta share, it's just a source of such frustration. So Zillow, my personal experience has been that you don't get what you pay for. And it can be really frustrating, and it can be very difficult to untangle the relationship from them. And we only did it this last time because our client so wanted this, thing on the map.
Give it a shot.
The deal is the deal. Even with the sale price of that home covers all of this cost overrun. But I will say that it's just if you're an agent listening to this,
it's a pattern of behavior.
Be very, very careful going into a business relationship with Zillow. And I'll leave it at that. That's my personal experience. That's my personal take. And I'm just frustrated by the disconnect between the billing and the customer service rep. And you're the customer when you're an agent with Zillow. So I think that probably doesn't break one of their rules in the agreements we've signed with them.
Subject to our review after the podcast is recorded.
Yeah, subject to verification that we're not going to get Zillow suing me after this. But I don't think it would be in Zillow's best interest to pursue us for to explain that we're having an unhappy relationship. 3 times we've had unhappy relationships with Zillow, and it's like Charlie Brown and the football, and Lucy. It's like, okay, let's try it again, and then it's another whiff, and you're just like, I just feel so annoyed to have to waste time dealing with that. All right, so that's one of the tales from the trenches, and a warning to other agents. I know you're out there listening. And then this next one is really about the nuts and bolts of working with buyers around uncertain times. And it can be really difficult to feel confident in the decision to write an offer. And we talked about this in our last podcast. One of the fallacies that buyers face is social proof. And social proof, real or imagined social proof, can really push people to make an offer. And that's why some agents, I think, pretend that their offers are coming in even when they're not, because they get the sense that this buyer needs a little nudge. And it can be very difficult to prove whether there's active interest in the property or not. Over the years, I've learned to pay a lot of attention to the nuance of language. And most agents, I think, are a little uncomfortable blatantly lying. And so they will use language that's a little bit softer than an offer's coming in. They'll say, yep, buyers are swirling. We're seeing strong interest. We've got lots of showings scheduled through the weekend. We're going to let it ride through the weekend. And then you say, but do you have an offer in hand? Or did any of those people say they're submitting? No, but man, they really love the house.
There's
and
lots of interest.
I think they might. Like, we're getting a lot of strong interest. And that kind of language is more indicative of they don't have an offer in hand and they're not sure they're going to get one. Versus, I've got another agent who has just submitted. We have until 10 a.m. tomorrow to respond. That's very clear. You have an offer, right? You can. And what I do what my dad used to do, right? When I came home late and as a student, in school, and he wanted to know where I was last night, he would ask me details, and then he would let some time go by, and then he would ask the detail. Then he'd ask again about the specific details.
I mean, he's a pro.
And basically, I think that asking for those details, you can hear the tone in their voice when they start to get uncomfortable, but you shouldn't push too hard as the buyer's agent, because the last thing you want is this other side hating you or feeling like you've extracted something that they didn't want to tell you. So you have to be really careful with how you get information from your counterparty, so to not alienate the relationship entirely. Don't take the tone of repeat everything you just said in detail 2 or 3 hours later, because it feels like you're being interrogated. It's not a good feeling. So this past weekend, we had 2 buyers who did not feel strongly enough about the house until effectively too late. We got in early to the showing, as early as was reasonable or the agents allowed, and then they wanted time to think on it. And they waited 48 hours, 72 hours, and then they both were like, well, tell what happened with it. Where are we with it? One said, I'm ready. We're interested. We want to write an offer. This is Tuesday. And we knew because of our team meeting that other agents on the team actually had been in bidding wars for at least one of them. And we only had found out that same morning that the property's already gone. We didn't have to contact the listing agent because one of the agents on our team had submitted and not gotten it under contract. And so we know it was gone. But what's really interesting is this time delay. One of the buyers, I feel like, was very clearly was waiting for someone else to write the offer to feel like they wanted it. And then they wanted to walk away because they really wanted a discount too, right? So knowing somebody else wants it makes you want it more, but then you've given up likely any semblance of getting it for less than the list price on the first weekend. And the other people, I think they just waited too long. They wait. If they had told us on Sunday that they really were interested, the next move is to begin verbal negotiations with the listing agent. And that's where we learn things like, are you expecting other offers? Are you setting an offer submission deadline? What's the right closing date? Do you need a post-closing occupancy agreement? Like, can we get all of the due diligence docs now? Can we get all of the disclosures now so that we can actually run those by our client and get them out of the way? It takes less things. It takes things out of the deal that could potentially cause it to break up. But we had no time for any of that because of the snooze you lose, wait and see philosophy that we love our buyers. It clearly wasn't the right house. There's always another house, but I think our buyers were both a little disappointed that the houses are gone, right? Because they were attractive, they were priced right, and so this comes back to Sun Tzu, right? And this is every battle is won before it's ever fought, and that is the research you do and the market knowledge you gain by seeing listings over time gives you greater confidence to move forward when you see the right house. And the most important one I'm seeing is insulating or inoculating yourself against social proof.
Social proof, yeah.
Real or
yeah.
It's not exactly social pressure. Social pressure is like you feel pressure because everyone else is wearing
like
this type of sneaker.
Yeah.
That does give you social proof that type of sneaker is popular. But social proof in this context is really because somebody else has indicated interest, you now want it more.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that, one, you end up overpaying in a bidding war easily. You could end up overpaying. You could also find yourself being swayed by other people's opinions rather than your own. And it's tough to take yourself out of that, though, because we're human, right? Like we gain value by the opinions of others, and they matter to us. So it's a very challenging thing for agents to navigate, and it's a very challenging thing for buyers to navigate.
I would say, like, I think it's an analogy, but a relationship parallel, or in a sense, is when you are single or before you've kind of really started the search for the home, jot down what you're looking for, right? And when you're in an objective and rational state of mind, create kind of a rubric. And when you see the house or, the potential partner pop up, you're less caught by the glitz or by the social proof or anything, and you adhere to that rational kind of rubric that you've put out for yourself. And maybe, the house isn't exciting by any means, but if it's checking all the boxes, then that's kind of your decision right there. For me, at least, and how I went about this home is I wasn't necessarily excited about it. I was like, holy cow, I'm buying a house. But it was more so like, yes, it has the bedroom, bathroom count. It's in the location that I want. It has these things. I'm going to pull the trigger because, one, I know that my price point and this house type goes quickly, but also because it's fit the bill. The hum and ha portion of it has already been fleshed out by coming up with this rubric and this requirement.
But you related it to dating, so do you have a dating rubric as well?
Well, actually, Osmond, this is from you. I got advice to write out what I'm looking for in a partner, and
I didn't.
Right?
All right. Maybe I shared that with you as a good idea, but I've never followed up on it.
No, it's because you were like, I don't want to know, but as advice, and so that's you write out what you're looking for, or kind of at least have it in mind before. Don't go to the house and then say, well, is it really, have that made up, because we are in this pricing segment, and with these housing types, we're in a cutthroat kind of market. And so you got to have together. And granted, I was the sole decision maker. So it's a little bit different when you have buyers that are a couple and they kind of have to weigh it through options and different life circumstances. But trying to be
every house has compromises at every price point. And the question is, do the benefits in this house outweigh the compromises. And in one of the homes this past weekend, one of the benefits of the house or features to the house was a wraparound front porch, which creates a lot of emotional resonance. Like there's a desirability to that is really lovely. And it's just resonant, right? Like it
gave me envy looking at it. Yeah,
right. Like it's a very beautiful thing, and you imagine yourself there on a summer's night with your family, reading a book, or having some tea, or having the neighbors over, or just hanging out on the front porch and waving to people going by. Like front porches create warmer, more friendly neighborhoods, and they're evocative of a nostalgia for a certain way of being. And so, for sure, there's a plus to that. But then there were all sorts of negatives that they had to get their head around that were compromises to their ideal home and the vision for that ideal home. And you're right, as with couples, as decision makers, it often helps to see the house together and discuss it, because you realize certain things together. Like you think you know your partner, but then you realize that in their head, there's certain things that they desire more than other things. And it's only until they see it, walk into it, and think about living there does that become evident. And so that's the importance of seeing homes. And the more you see that are close fits, the more likely you are to feel confidence when the right house pops up. But when the right one pops up and you're getting that whole body yes, the right strategy in most cases is to submit as quickly as possible, because there are other people that are delaying. And if you make an offer that is difficult for the seller to refuse because it hits all of their boxes, you're very likely to get it. And a seasoned agent is going to say to you, look, I've got this great offer from an agent like Osmond that's been in the business 20 years, that's really well qualified. The buyer's really well qualified. They're putting more than 20% down. They've lived in this community a long time. They're real buyers. And he's likely to get them to closing because he's an experienced agent. And our competition is an agent that says, I'm going to get you that offer as soon as I can. They love the house. I've been doing this for 5 years. These guys are great. These guys are great.
We're working on the address.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're ready to send it. We're ready to send it. But then they don't. And when they eventually do, it's under the pressure of the first offer. So now you know these people were pressured to submit because they felt like they're going to lose it. And that does what? That increases the chances of that buyer flaking. Yeah. So buyer number 2 to the table could be stronger to the table, but they could also be more likely to flake. And there are a lot of exits in the contract to buy and sell. And what you want the highest price that has the highest probability of closing, not the highest price that's going to break up with you in 2 weeks. And that's something you have to think about in the context of when the offers are received, what pressure was on the buyers when they were writing these offers, the experience of the agents involved, and then also the financing and other terms that are within the offer itself can impact which offer gets selected and why. And it's not always the highest price. So all of that really comes into play when you are thinking about your strategy and the approach you're taking. Are you taking a strictly disciplined approach where you won't even look at houses that don't meet every single criteria? Or are you going to look at homes that are slightly different than the ideal? And then when you are faced with the pressure of other offers, which you are very likely to be in competitive price segments. Sorry, there's a deer right outside my window.
Oh, cool.
What are you going to do? Right? And the conversation ahead of time before it happens is so vital to sticking with your strategy versus suddenly finding out there's other offers coming in and feeling that pressure. How does that impact you as a buyer? And as a seller, how do you think about the timing of these offers and the pressures that these buyers were under when you choose the offer you really want? Right. And don't fall prey to your greed, because the offer that comes in really high could be the people that look for every way to get out of the deal or want to renegotiate over things later that they agreed not to negotiate on, like the age of the roof. We've had that deal before where they said, we're not going to negotiate on anything. We know the roof is 10 years old, 12 years old. We're not going to ask you for anything. And then they're like, oh, this roof is 12 years old. We want to negotiate on inspection over the 12-year-old roof. And the reason they want to do that is they want clawback, because they paid more than the contract price was higher than they wanted it to be to get it locked down. So
don't fall prey to your greed, I think that's a good quote. I wonder if the automatic show notes of this podcasting service will pick that one up, but I've made a little note too. Yeah.
All right,
no,
so we
bring
move
up
on to
good points. Yeah, and it's not a concrete thing. I think I came in a little hard with my advice, but
well, I liked your
perspective.
I liked your analogy to dating. I'm curious what your rubric actually looks like, but as your as your employing broker and boss, I don't want you sending me this. HR does not approve. So I hope it's well written. I will say that I definitely did that. I wrote out really what I wanted in a partner, and her birthday happens to be today. And it was like, I don't know if you want to call that the woo-woo, or the universe responded, or my subconscious attracted exactly what, I don't know what to say, but it was like 99% of all the characteristics of a partner that I wanted. Like, she is an amazing human, and I feel very, very lucky to be in relationship with her. We've been together 12 years, and they've been amazing 12 years. So, rubrics.
Some merit to it then, yeah. In a rational state of mind.
Okay, let's move on to market conditions.
Whoa, loaded question, this one.
Is now a good time to buy? That's the question that market conditions is intended to help you answer. But a lot of that question is determined by personal circumstance. One thing that is really clear is that we're in a time of uncertainty. And I think this just began with the Iran war in a big way, in terms of what the economy is going to do under whipsaw oil prices that are changing massively, like price changes that are just mind-blowing on a daily basis, based on what the president or other people in the administration are saying. And so typically, when it's unclear whether you're going to have a job in 6 months, which could be AI driven, or it's unclear whether we're going to be in a recession in 6 months because we're at war with Iran, buyers hesitate. And when buyers hesitate, they don't write offers. They feel nervous, right? Uncertainty creates additional risk that has nothing to do with the real estate transaction, but has everything to do with their confidence in making a major life decision. So we do look at the data, and we always do so with our clients when they want to go down a deep dive into the data relative to their specific situation, which means drill down to the price range, the neighborhood, the property type, the bedrooms and bathrooms, the age of the home, all of those factors, the design and layout of the home. You can drill down the analysis to a very, very narrow set of criteria, and then look back the last 5 years to give them a sense of how that market has shifted. And do that in real time is what we would do with our clients. But for purposes of this pod, let's go down the rabbit hole, but not so deep. We're just going to talk about the Denver market, and we're going to talk about...
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about the Boulder market, and the broad market, and this is on the heels of a Post article, the Denver Post, which we provided a link to in the show notes. And in this article, it says the number of homes and condo sales in Metro Denver last month shot up nearly 30% from January to 2,629. Okay, now the first question of this is home and condo sales in Metro Denver. Now, what exactly is Metro Denver? Metro Denver, are they including Aurora in Metro Denver? Are they including Commerce City in Metro Denver? Where are they drawing the lines of Metro Denver? So let me just do Denver County, okay? And the reason I'm doing Denver County is very specific. What I discovered over the years is that a lot of agents will code their house as if it's in Denver when it actually is not in Denver. But they feel more fear at putting the wrong county for legal reasons than the wrong city. So Denver County, when it comes to analysis of the data directly from the MLS, tends to have more accuracy than choosing Denver City. And they are the same. They are the same thing. Okay? All right.
Yeah.
So we're only looking, so this said home and condo sales. Okay, so I'm going to do home, single-family houses, and condo. I'm not going to include townhomes, which is an option. It's an attached dwelling, but that's not what this sentence said. And when you look at actual number of sales, okay, because that's what it says, home and condo sales, which is what? Sales volume. That's closings. There were 530 in February, and there were 370 in January. So where are they getting the 2,629 number when we're looking at 370 in January.
It's.
Let's add townhomes. Just hold on. Let me
I
keep
guess
going
so.
here.
Yeah, I'm
Let's
trying
add townhomes.
to like. Do they include the town of or city of Sheridan? You know, are they including far more other things?
I have no idea what the Denver Metro Association of Realtors is talking about, but I think they're talking about all of the markets that, if you pull down their data, they're covering a lot more than just Denver. But the way this
Right.
article is written, it sounds like we're just talking about Denver, and we're not. So when you add townhomes into the data set, you have 424 sales in January, 599 closings in February. And that's down 6.1% year over year. We don't care about the difference between January and February. That number is every year is going to have high volatility because January is typically the slowest month of the year. December and January fight for that right every year, and then it starts rising from that point. Okay, and every month until May or June, you're going to see significant increases to sales volume in a normal year, and a non-COVID normal, we're not at war with Iran year. That's what you should see. Okay, so the monthly change is irrelevant. The year-over-year change is much more substantive, and frankly, the quarter-over-quarter change is when you really start to see when there's actually significant shifts in market behavior. But the numbers make no sense in this Denver Post article, so let's start there. And it does say that sales were down 6.9% below closings seen a year earlier. That's for January. We can do February data because we're up to February at this point, right? And we saw a total of 599. This is houses, condos, and townhomes, which is down 6.1. So not materially different than the 6.9, right? 6.1 versus 6.9, but not
still
quite as down.
Pretty within line.
Okay, so now let's hit the next bullet point. An even more encouraging sign of a market rebound came in the number of pending sales or purchases still in process. Those are up 29.2% on the month to 3,737 and are running 15.3% above February 2025 levels. So let's see how the data actually looks. And this is, again, single family houses, condos, and townhomes. When we look at pending sales for Denver County, we see an increase of 13% year over year. There are currently, as of February, there were 823 pending sales. So a substantive increase of 13%. That's a strong sign for March closings. But when you break it down to single family houses, 14.7%.
They are giving that year over year too, this time.
Yeah, now we're talking year over year. So when we look at single family houses alone, 545 pending sales in February, and that's an increase of 14.7%. And when we look at condos and townhomes by themselves, they're up 10.3% year over year, 278 pending sales. And when you merge those data points together and all of it together, you're looking at an increase year over year of 13% in pending sales. Nowhere near 29%. And I think when they mean on the month, they're talking about the difference between January and February. And then they're saying 15.3% above February. So that's year over year is the 15.3. But suddenly we're talking February, not January. So what I notice is how this is written, right? Look at the word shot up. And then the word even more encouraging sign. So this is spin that is written by somebody who cheerleads the real estate market. And that person is probably somebody at the Denver Metro Association of Realtors who is out there cheerleading the market because it's always a good time to buy and sell. Right, that's what this article is. It's not actually actionable, and it's 100% spin by the Metro Association of Realtors that's picked up by the Denver Post. And it seems like they're being credible, but they're not. They're being cheerleaders. All right, so here's the last piece. The busier activity was accompanied by a 12.1% increase in new listings and a near record 9.2% rise in inventory. So they're saying new listings are up 12%, total inventory is up 9%, and then they give you a number of houses and condos available, which is an absurd number, almost 9,000. So let's look at this for actually Denver County, not whatever this metro thing is that they didn't define. So we're looking at new listings.
DMAR, right? Yeah.
And single-family houses, they went up. There's 729 new listings in February. That's an increase of 9.8%. 6% for single-family detached houses. And for condos, you're looking at 568 new listings that hit the market, and that's an increase of 4.2%. So the increase in condos and townhomes is less than the substantive increase in new listings of single-family houses. And then when we look at active listings, single-family houses by themselves, we had 1,092. That's a decrease of 1.4% year over year. And then condos and townhomes, there were 1,413 on the market in February, and that's an increase of 11.4%. So condos are still piling on with more inventory compared to last year, but houses are starting to drop. So single-family houses, particularly in certain price ranges, what we've been seeing are bidding wars, particularly below 1.5. And above 1.5, the market starts to soften. It's really soft above 3. And that seems to be holding true for Denver County as well, as a general principle. All right. So should you buy in Denver? Is now a good time, was the question. And I think the answer is, if you can stomach the higher association fees, you could probably get a fantastic deal on a condo or a townhome in Denver right now. Just watch out for HOAs that are poorly reserved or poorly managed, and take advantage of this heavy selection and negotiate aggressively. Be prepared to walk because you've got lots of choices. For houses, it looks like the market has started to switch to the other direction. So the right time to buy might have been November, December, and January. As we go from February into March, it's looking like the market's starting to whipsaw back to the seller's side when it comes to leverage. But particularly below 1.5 is what we've been seeing. Denver, it's probably lower than that because it's not as expensive as the Boulder market. And if you were our client looking in Denver, we would go down the rabbit hole and really tighten up this analysis to help give you, to the neighborhood and your specific price range and property type, again, to give you actionable information you can actually use in your real estate strategy versus this 30,000 foot level analysis, which is better than what you're getting in the Denver Post, which is frankly garbage analysis, but is not good enough to be actionable.
And for what it's worth, the Denver Post is referencing the Denver Metro Association of Realtors Market Trends Report for February, which also isn't saying exactly when it pulled its data, which makes a huge difference. Like, we saw this and we were like, well, it's March, maybe the February data has baked in. But
realtor associations are notorious for cherry-picked cheerleading analysis, and unfortunately newspapers are short-staffed, don't have the analytical chops to do their own, and their customers are the realtors, right? Realtors spend a lot of money on advertising, so they're likely to not write articles that are disparaging of the market. Instead, you see, and this is the telltale language, I'll say it again, the market shot up last month, and there's even more encouraging signs of a rebound, and the busier activity was accompanied by, this is languaging that, it doesn't matter what the data said, right? They're going to still spin it in positive ways to cheerlead their customers.
Yeah. The headline, Metro Denver's housing market revs up as affordability improves. And it could very well too be, right? We're seeing that 29% number. It was very low when they were looking at just Denver. So, zoom out. Okay, now we have the percentage increase we want to look like the market's really doing something.
Well, and let's mix data from January and February. Let's mix data from month over month to year over year. Let's make it as confusing as possible to help people come to the conclusion we want them to come to, which is the market's waking up. Get in there. All right, let's hit the city of Boulder, and we're going to do this pretty quickly.
Really quick. That's social proof right there, right? If you're a buyer on the sideline and you read something like this, you're like, oh, dang, I got to get in there. Go crazy. My
agent said you better move now because the market's getting hot. And look, there's an article from the Denver Post saying the same thing.
Yep. So Boulder.
All right, so let's talk about the city of Boulder. We're going to cover it pretty quickly. And this is the city, not the county. For those of you who are not familiar with our local market, the city is within the county. And I think just for the interest of time, let's only look at detached single-family houses. And if you are a client or prospective client and want this type of analysis, but for your situation, schedule a meeting. Let's make it happen. Just make sure you're not under a buyer agency agreement, or a listing agreement with another agent, and I'm more than happy to take time to walk you through what's really happening and in an effort to earn your trust and represent you. But for now, let's talk about City of Boulder. Okay, detached single-family houses. Let's start with new listings. There were 131 last month. That's the month of February, which is completely flat from a year ago. No difference in the number of new listings hitting the market. But total inventory, 252 houses on the market last month. That's an increase of 3.3%. Pretty trivial increase. Okay, and I think that's well within standard deviation, almost certainly. So I would not get excited about 3.3% difference in total inventory. Again, it's a sign that the market is looking very similar to what we had last year. Under contract, there were 69 houses under contract. These are pending sales. Also completely flat from a year ago, the same number a year ago. Closings. FedEx guy.
Is that deer back?
What's that?
Okay.
What's the beeping? It's the FedEx guy. Okay, the number of closings. There were 50 closings last month, an increase of 22% year over year, so that's a significant jump. And when you look back on the January had 41 compared to January of 2025 had 40. So you're looking at 2 months. You're looking at January was basically the same, and February saw an increase of 22% in total closings. And let's see, should we do
dang near
price
identical.
Let's do price per total square foot. Again, single-family houses. 487 was the median last month. That's a decrease of 18% year over year. And the average was also 539, a decrease of 17.6% year over year. Keep in mind that when you're talking about only 50 closings, the sample size is small. So this isn't really an indication of price movement. It's more of an indication of what's selling within a given price range. But it's a useful data point, and when you're looking at dollar per square, make sure you also look at very similar homes and similar locations of a similar size, because dollar per square is closely related to the size of the house. And if you are looking at giant houses, of course the dollar per square is low, and if you're looking at really small houses, of course the dollar per square is really high. So it's just people need to understand the usefulness and the limitations of dollar per square. All right, I think that more or less covers the key data points. I guess we could mention actual sale price. So the actual sale price in Boulder, the median was $1.4 million last month, a decrease of 27.3% year over year, and the average was $1,594,783, which was a decrease of 28.9% year over year. I think this is just cheaper houses selling, and the high end is sitting there. Okay.
I mean, if you wanted to export that data set and look through it, I'm pretty much sure that's what you'd see, right?
Yeah. What neighborhood did we do last week? Was it Newlands?
Don't believe we did a neighborhood last week. Let me check.
Oh, okay. It was 2 weeks ago. One of the things we like
Newlands
to do
is what we did the overview on, and we did El Dorado Canyon last week.
Oh, that's right.
Or El Dorado Springs. Yeah,
it was really El Dorado Springs, and it's such a weird little market. But that was an interesting deep dive. Way more actionable than the city of Boulder as a whole.
Yeah, the city of Boulder's funky, and I mean at these markets there's always that sample size issue, so it's fun to look at. But very good coffee table or dinner table in-law conversation metrics to jot down on the inside of your hand before you go to dinner. And it's smudged. Yeah, sales went up 100%.
Yep, that's right. And the Denver Post says now's a great time to buy or sell. Okay.
Always.
So is it a good time to buy in the city of Boulder? My sense is the market en masse has decided that it's returning to being a seller's market below 1.5. Not so much of a seller's market that you can sling junk. For a while during the peak of the market, you could sell anything. It was insane. People were just throwing cash at every single property that they could find, including ones in really bad locations. We're not quite at that level, but it is swinging back toward the sell side in terms of leverage. And above 1.5, it quickly starts to diminish and swing back to the buyers. So if you are confident in your employment or you need to move money out of the stock market into something that you can live in, I think buying a house makes a lot of sense. And if you're at the upper end of the market, you should be really aggressive in shopping and comparing your options, and be really careful who you work with, because there's a lot of agents that don't want you to know the data because they'd rather push you into real estate that gets them commission money in their pocket, and their fiduciary duty goes out the window. So I'd be really, really careful if your agent's pushing you hard at any given price range or any time, because you're not getting good. That's a very strong indicator you're not getting good advice.
I concur.
That's all you got to say?
I think pretty much nail on the head, right? Like, especially at the entry level, it's for sure rounding out to a seller's market once again. I mean, there was a tiny haircut maybe on median price at the entry level, or average price just on the entry level price segment, but I think that's mostly in the rearview mirror now, and interest is renewed, and the entry level never gets a break, really. You know? Yeah.
I mean, there's been some really attractive houses that I think have been underpriced. I can't talk about those because they're active listings, but shockingly low price on a listing that popped up in Table Mesa. We almost listed this house, and it would have been a lot higher. And I think this agent just wants to get this thing dumped and sold as fast as possible, because it sort of shocks me at how low they are on price, but I can't tell you anymore because it's an active listing. But
where can you tell us about it?
In the newsletter, which is due and delayed and due, and it will be happening this week. I am so committed to making that happen, so 100% expect a newsletter this week. Let's move on to what else we could talk about, and that is sold listings. So every week we like to talk about a handful of listings that sold, and we choose these listings based on their price point and their location. We think they illustrate market conditions in those price points and locations, or otherwise there's something interesting about the deal, or sometimes we just really like the house and want to talk about that too. So to be completely honest, sometimes it's just a cool house, and
we are human.
We want to talk about the cool house, and sometimes it's just a weird house, and boy, we like to talk about weird houses too.
Yeah, and this first one, 2586 2nd Street?
3rd Street.
No, 3rd Street, yeah. Reading is fundamental. Do you want me to keep going?
Well, do you want your take first, or should I? How about I give it an intro and then we'll get your take?
Let's do it. Yeah, I like that format. Yeah.
Okay. So this property is in the Trailhead subdivision, or Trailhead neighborhood, and if you're not familiar with that, it's right next to Sanitas, and Sanitas is on the west side and Mapleton Hill is on the right side. There is public access to the trails through the neighborhood, which I'm sure a number of these neighbors wished wasn't the case. The lot sizes are reasonable, but because these homes are so large and the orientation of these homes on the lot and the age of the landscaping, it doesn't necessarily feel very private. But you're getting a much newer home that is custom designed, and there are luxury homes in this location almost exclusively. And this is one of the resales. So this house was built in 2023, and we don't know what they ultimately paid for it. There's a transaction value of $1.7 million in 2021. I'm pretty sure that's just the dirt. Okay, I don't think that was the actual house. I think that was like the dirt and the building plans. It's not, because that seems way low for what this location is. But the family acquired it, or the couple, I should say, and it had been assessed at 4.728. That was the most recent tax assessment, of which 1.6 was for the land and 3.1 was for the improvements, meaning the structure. And the seller, let's talk about the deal history before we talk about the specifics of the house. The seller tried to sell this thing all the way back in 2023. They originally listed
it was built.
Yeah, for 5.5, basically right after it was built. It's unclear if they even lived in it. I'm not sure about that. I was not the listing agent, but it was originally listed at 5.5. And they didn't budge on price for that first year. That was from September of 2023 to the end of the year. And then they brought it back with a new listing number, still at 5.5. But they didn't do anything with the pricing until February, when they cut it by $500,000. And then in April, they cut it another $50,000. And then it went on. It was withdrawn and then back, and then withdrawn and then back a couple of times, unclear why, no explanation. And the listing expired at the end of 2024. Fast forward to March of 2025. We don't know if it's the same agent, by the way. I'm not going to look that up. I don't need to get into why agents were fired or not. But it was brought back with a new listing number at 4.8 million, so about 150,000 below the last list price. This is March of last year. They cut it by July to 4.5. And then the listing went through an expired and back again and expired and back again status, which is strange, but okay. And then it was fully expired in September of last year. They brought it back in February at 4.5. It was on the market for less than a week when somebody locked it down, and the final negotiated sale price was 4.2 million, which is a massive discount to the original thought of 5.5.
5.5, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and years waiting for the buyer to show up, but eventually a buyer did, and they paid cash for the house, but that's typical for this price point. Let's talk about the house itself. So it has a really unusual and very coveted feature for this neighborhood, and that is the 5-car attached garage. So we have had a couple of people approach us about figuring out how to get a big garage into Mapleton Hill, and the short answer is you can't. Like, that's going to be really challenging. Maybe you could build something underground, but probably not. And
this isn't Mapleton Hill, though, right?
This isn't. It's directly west of Mapleton Hill. So this is where you get the location virtually of Mapleton Hill, access to Sanitas, access to downtown, and the ideal shopping center. But you don't, and you get your cake and eat it too. You get this giant 5-car garage, decent sized lot, almost 9,000 square feet. It's a 5-bedroom, 5-bath, only 1 bedroom on the upper, 3 on the main. I'm guessing the last one's in the basement. And then 5 bathrooms. And when you look at the photos, it's really a lovely house. That it's designed to feature those flat iron views, but of course you're also, if you open that nano wall, you're also dealing with your neighbor's view too. But you can see all the beauty of
ultra luxury suburbia, right? Like, these are some fantastic luxurious homes, but you're still in kind of almost like the suburban nearness to your neighbors.
Worse, it feels like you have so little privacy because you also have all those people hiking around Sanitas every day, all these tourists that come into town, all these randoms that go running up and down, and it's one of the most packed open spaces in Boulder for a reason. It's beautiful. I love the Sanitas open space, but you could pretty much be guaranteed you're never hiking alone there. And people access the neighborhood, access Sanitas through the neighborhood. So you're going to have a lot of humans in this location, plus the whole the academy, the elder care facility, but at least you supposedly have access to the saltwater pool. That's supposed to be community access. I think it's built,
sweet.
So Hamish, this can be an outing for us one day, is to do a pool night. But the house itself is stunning, right? The views are really pretty. If you're into contemporary homes, like, this is about as good as it gets, right? Like, it's a really lovely house. The lack of window coverings makes me laugh because you're every window you can see how exposed you are, right? Like, you're ever going to live in a house like this, which tells me they probably weren't living in it because there's no sign of any window coverings at all. It's probably been vacant this entire time. And the first thing the buyers are going to do is put up some window coverings because there's no way you're living in that fishbowl. But cool. All the finishes are cool. Everything about it is turnkey. The colors, the gray and white, is a little old at this point. Like, people are preferring warmer tones, and this is sort of house flipper gray white walls. But other than that, what an amazing place. And that icing on the cake, man, that 5-car garage for the right buyer, there's no other house. Like,
and that looks like a pull-through, right? Where you stack them one in front of the other, at least from the exterior photo that I could find. It looks like there's a double garage and then a single. So I guess
I think they're tandems, and one of them's even bigger than a tandem. I don't entirely know. It's 1,288 square feet with 11-foot ceilings and heated floors.
So you could fit lifts in there. That's great. That was going to be the next question.
And if you look in the photos, there's a cargo trailer in there that looks about 20 feet long. I own one. And the brand of that cargo trailer is the luxury cargo trailer brand. So these people did not... Yeah, they're really pricey. Yeah. And typically it's like a toy hauler type setup. Yeah. So anyway, that's this particular property. I think, 4.2 million... For this location with these unique features, you end up under $1,000 a square. I think that's actually well bought. I think other than the privacy factor, if you can get past that, this is a very cool house, and they finally got out of it. You know, congratulations to the seller. They kept trying. They tried for years, and they finally got it sold. And that's the reality of the high end, by the way. So what you see on Instagram and all these other websites of agents showing off how hot and sexy the houses are, the reality is it could take years to sell a higher end home, particularly if you're not aggressive on pricing and your marketing isn't dialed in to begin with. And we don't really know the backstory of what happened here, or if they even had more than one agent, but clearly trying to get $5.5 million cost them 2 years on market.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe a buyer's agent would have pushed them to put in an offer at, what did it go for again? 4.1?
I mean, they might have offered.
Yeah.
I mean, they may have offered 3.9, and we don't know what happened in the negotiation, but I think they got a pretty good discount. You know, they got $300,000 below list, which is sizable, and you know that's 7-8%, something like that. That's a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, our next property is 1450 High Street. And this just closed on the 6th, a few days ago. It's a home built in the 1950s, so post-war, and in an exceptional location. Just east of Broadway on High Street, extremely desirable spot, close to downtown, has views, and a little smaller size lot, but supposedly has 4 parking spaces off-street. And a 5-bedroom, 4-bath house, 3,800 square feet. And the house itself was listed in August of 2025 at 5. Didn't get it sold. Brought it back at a lower price in 2026. They dropped $500,000. Still wasn't selling. Actually, hold on. Wait a minute. This is very confusing, this listing history. There was like a simultaneous withdrawn to expired status when a new listing went into place in 2026, this year at 4.3. Okay, so they brought it back this year at 4.3, and they went under contract and sold it for 3.95 with small concession of $1,600 for undisclosed reasons. Sunset Hill is, again, super desirable, but the house doesn't even have a garage. And at $4 million, you kind of expect to have a garage. But when you look at these photos, right, this house just screams, this would be a great place for like a movie producer's party. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wonder if the people that are buying this house or bought this house have Sundance in mind, right? Like this is the kind of house that would be spectacular to throw a party or to have your crew stay in during Sundance for 10 days. And it's got 5 bedrooms, 4 baths, there's parking spaces galore, and you can walk to everything you want to walk to. It's nicely updated inside. The outside still looks a lot like the 1950s, but painted white and modern. I would not be shocked at all if that's what this house turns into. It's not subject to an association, and it's right close to downtown. Has there even that backyard? Like, look at the backyard has views. Right,
and also that backyard where it like drops down the mountainside to me looks very California, like Hollywood-esque.
Right,
you see that in the high selling homes. Yeah.
So that's what I'm calling this, the Sundance house, and it sold for 3.95, which was $1,032 a square foot.
Yeah.
And I don't really have much else to say about it.
I'm with you too. I think as well Sundance, and it's funny like. You see it listed, at least I do on Realtor.com, where it says 4-car garage, but it's really 4-car off street, which is to say park on the driveway. So
the downside of this location, I'm going to add, is that you are so close to downtown that you're likely going to have random property crime, random people knocking on the door. It's not going to feel quite as secure or as private. But the trade-off is you are so close to all the stuff in downtown that you're going to never have a problem finding a tenant. And I suspect for the right tenant, you could make up a year's worth of rent, just rent it during Sundance and then use it for yourself. Otherwise, they're going to trash it likely during their parties, but that's what giant security deposits are for. And so if you're, let's say, here's the use case in my head. You've got a grandkid that lives here in Boulder with your adult children, right? You've got a small baby that is now part of your family. You want to be close to your grandkids or kid, but you don't want to live in Boulder year round. So buy something like this, rent it out for the month of February for extreme amounts of money, and then use it as your own landing pad / guest house for when people are visiting family nearby. And you really have locked in a smart investment that will likely pay for itself over time.
Yeah. And one final note for me is I'm looking at this, that picture of the backyard again, and then I went to satellite view. It looks like there's an alley that passes right through there. So
that's where
short of some stairs, you could have added you could have added like a detached garage or something down there, and then some stairs up.
Probably
maybe
not easy. The structure, maybe. I mean, the engineering. So look at photo 3. You can see where the off-street parking is. There's that long driveway that's kind of flagged around the corner. God, I can't imagine parking a car there. But
I don't know,
could you build a giant garage there? Maybe. It's going to be an engineering challenge for sure. And it's only a 6,700 square foot lot. And the neighbors are probably going to fight you because it's a very pricey location. I don't know. It's interesting.
A lot of maybes. Yep.
A lot of maybes with this house. But I love that photo just to show you how steep that driveway is. Then there's a 90-degree dog leg. And if you miss that turn, there's like a cliff your car falls off.
Not much room for error. Uber home after a night out.
Or if it's snowing, right? Like make sure you got your studded tires on because you're going for a sled run. Mm-hmm. But cool house. I don't have any problem saying that. I think it would be so much fun to throw parties at this house. But also, I think the house has some living limitations. The split layout, the lack of a garage in particular.
Yeah. With you on that. Also, just a shout out for it being High Street and in Boulder and in Colorado.
Yep. Our next one is 3087th Street in Newlands. And this one strikes me because it's such a large house. Almost 6,000 square feet, 5-bedroom, 5-bath, 2-car detached garage on a smaller-ish lot, 6,200 square feet. Likely it was permitted before compatible development passed and came into effect. So they were able to build such a large home, because today I think you would find it really challenging to get a 5,800 square foot house with a 2-car attached garage in Newlands on a 6,200 square foot lot. Newlands has been ground zero for preventing large homes on small lots starting in mid-2000s. So I think this house predates the compatible development ordinance is my hypothesis. It was completed in 2007, and
compatible development, really quick, is like you have to be like a sum of the neighbors' square footage ratio to the lot, or
not exactly. So in the city of Boulder, compatible development relates to floor area ratios that are a ratio of the lot size. There's also rules around articulating walls and sill plate heights. And the idea is that you don't have large houses on small lots. That's what Newlands didn't want to see happen. And they pushed city council at that time to pass this draconian ordinance to limit that from happening. And so, but those are the two big things, is the house size is related to the size of the lot. You still have to conform to zoning, which means setbacks, height limits. But then there are also things like articulating walls. What they wanted to get rid of was looming walls. The neighbors didn't want to face a giant wall that's just there to maximize square footage. So it wasn't just Newlands that was subject to compatible development. There's one house in particular on Ash Street in Martin Drive that was built that they snuck their permit in as fast as possible to beat the timeline. And that house is like a giant box with no articulating walls at all. And now it's kind of gotten, people have gotten used to it in the neighborhood. It's surrounded by trees, but it 100% was like, oh no, the city's passing a rule about big houses on small lots. Let's get the design in fast. And that's what you see there.
That's cool.
All right, so this particular house, great layout, 4 bedrooms on the upper, 1 in the basement. Like, this is classic house stuff that most people would find very desirable. It's far enough away from 9th Street. It's far enough away from North Boulder Park. And you're on the other side of the Alpine Balsam development. So it's a great spot in Newlands. It sort of splits the difference between Broadway and the west side, 4th Street. So kind of right in the middle of the neighborhood. And when you look at the design, I'm not a huge fan of the gray exterior paint color. I think that makes it look a little dated. But otherwise, it looks really turnkey, ready to rock. I don't see... Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is probably original finishes from 2007, but they were all well chosen. Maybe the kitchens had an update or a refresh. Interior paint colors maybe a little dated, but it's effectively turnkey for the vast majority of buyers in this price range. It's a lot of house for 3.4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty classic. So they listed it. Let's talk about the listing history. It was listed in 2005 at 3.65, but at the end of 2000, nope, sorry, strike that. They listed it in April of 2005 at 3.7. And then they refreshed the listing in September.
2025.
Yep, last year. Yeah.
Okay.
And then they refreshed it in September at 3.65, so they came down 75 grand. And then nothing happened until November, and then it went under contract in November, and it's not clear why it had such a long contract period, or even if it was the same buyer, but it has been under contract since November 7th. Kind of crazy. And then it eventually sold for 3.4, so $250,000 below the last list price, pretty substantial discount. Let's see what the math is, just so that we can benchmark her for our clients. 3.4 over 3.65 minus 1, so about 7%, 6.8%, yep. And you end up at dollar per square of just $581. I mean, that house is kind of cheap at $581.
From a dollar per square standpoint, right?
Right. It's sort of, it's sort of funny because you shouldn't get fixated on dollar per square, but when I look at 5,800 square feet, 581 a square at a location that's so much more livable than the last house on High Street, I would rather have this house all day long. Hamish, what's your hot take?
Yeah, I'm with you. If I was to put it between the first house that we talked about that was right on Sanitas and this one, I would probably lean towards Sanitas.
Really?
Newlands doesn't quite do it for me. I actually on the first house said, right, like luxury suburbia. This Newlands neighborhood to me feels even more so like that. But for the size and the functionality and everything, I mean, I can think of plenty of buyers that we've had that have large families that would, I don't know about froth at the mouth, but they would be very interested in this.
You're comparing it to the house that's in Trailhead.
That's right. Yeah, that one, 2586 3rd Street. Which, I mean, is not an apples to apples to begin with, but I'm over here still stuck on the 5-car garage.
I mean, you're looking at $800,000 difference in value. You do not get the 5-car garage. You do not get the views. And you get a much older home with a more traditional design. So is it worth $800,000 to go to Trailhead? Maybe.
What's the view
for the right
worth?
Buyer? I mean, the view could be worth... the view adds tremendous value. The access to Sanitas adds value. The lack of privacy is sort of a mix-up. This could also have privacy issues. Newlands has lots of privacy issues. And you're also now dealing with a home that's 20 years old, or practically.
And at that square footage, I mean, those homes need considerable amount of capital to kind of keep maintained. The systems are larger, the furnace, everything. The life support of the home is more.
The exterior finish is also more likely to be ethos in 07. So, I mean, I could argue that the Trailhead house is a better buy.
Interesting. I wouldn't have expected that, but yeah. At our arm's length analysis, right?
I mean, it sort of depends on... I think the biggest factor for a buyer of looking at both of these houses is how ostentatiously are they willing to live. Because when you live in Trailhead, it's very visible and obvious wealth. And when you live on 7th Street, it's more subtle. Newlands is not, there's more diversity of incomes in Newlands than Trailhead. Trailhead is very fancy. And that, I think, sends a signal that some people are really happy with, right? These are the people that are going to drive a very ostentatious car, right? They are totally happy with you having full knowledge of their affluence. And then there's other people that they come from a different tradition around affluence and wealth, and they don't want to broadcast that to the world. So, and
that
maybe
is
they
very
just
Newlands as a whole. Newlands isn't like broadcasty in general. From my perspective,
it's more refined. It's less in your face. It also is a much bigger house, right? Like this is a 5,800 square foot house,
much larger,
and you might just need more space for you and your family. Even though both houses had 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms, it's sort of like trading the garage space for the house space. Like, do you value your time with your family, or do you value your time with storage for your stuff? And, Hamish, I can see you and I leaning toward the storage for your stuff part, because we have vehicle toys that we want to have in garages.
Yeah. So,
all right, let's move on.
This one we both saw, 4445 Grinnell Ave. Grinnell.
I
Either
say
way.
Grinnell. I don't think it's Grinnell, but go ahead.
I think Grinnell's kind of a gross way to call it, but I kind of face value. This house showed really well. It was an interesting, I don't want to say labyrinth, that's almost like a negative connotation, but it was an interesting layout. You could tell where it had been bumped out and expanded and somewhat renovated from the original kind of 2-story home that this is. But for us, and we noticed...
Hold on, it's not a 2-story, it's a bi-level.
You're right. From a bi-level.
Sorry, I just want to clarify.
No, you're good. No, yeah,
is.
good catch.
And they did do a frontal addition, which created a little bit better of an entryway, which is one of the challenges in these bi-levels.
And we've actually seen that before on another bi-level that we listed a little while ago, and I'm actually, the more I see them, I'm kind of a fan of those little like frontal bumps. But the biggest thing, and we noted it before we even went to go see it, is that it's on Grinnell, which is a kind of egress thoroughfare, Main Street area for Table Mesa and that whole area. So it sees traffic, and it's not like, oh, maybe it sees traffic. It's a main way into the neighborhood. Yeah, I had to leave halfway through the showing. I put provocative in parentheses next to this address too, and it's visible in the listing photos, but there's a lot of just adult art throughout it, and it's tasteful, sure, but it was just noted and noteworthy.
I wouldn't necessarily call it adult art. They're nudes, right? They're bodies that are very artistically portrayed, and
yeah.
The thing I find really odd about this house is, first, the house itself is very cool, but it's small. It's only 1,850 square feet. 2 bedrooms on the upper, 2 on the lower, and the front level addition. But they chose to list it as 1-story ranch, bi-level, which it's not. It's a bi-level.
Yeah.
And it felt very tight and customized in the showings to the current owner's sense of taste, and you also get very distracted by all the art on the walls. But really, our clients were seriously considering an offer on this one. The part that gave them pause, and what we actually told them they should not offer on this house. And the reason is that even though it's turnkey and lovely, it's also on Grinnell, which is a direct turn off of Broadway, and you get a lot of traffic between Broadway and Gillespie. It's a through street. And so it's too close to Broadway. You're also going to get a bunch of traffic noise from Broadway in this location. So we think that even though this home is significantly more expensive to the home they bought on Albion, the home they bought on Albion has way more long-term upside potential because of its preferred location. So that's how the cookie crumbled. And some of the finished choices in here are very unique and bespoke to the seller's intention. But ultimately, you're looking at only 1,850 square feet, which is just really tight. And the home that our clients did end up buying was substantially larger. It had a bigger addition and a detached garage. So better in the long run from a layout perspective, but we'll need lots of work to bring it up to this standard. But it's usually better to start with the right location before you start capitalizing it, adding on capital after acquisition for improving it. And that's why we strongly advised our clients to not buy this one, and they took a pass on it. The house itself was listed in 2005. Nope, strike that. 2000. Oh, yeah, no. 2000. Okay, so this...
I've got 2016.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. It was listed in January of 2026, this year, at 1.75. It was on the market about a month before a buyer locked it down, and they got it for 1.622. So when we do the math, 1.622 over 1.75 minus the 1, that's a 7.3% discount to listing, which, I think that makes sense given the location and the fact there probably weren't a bunch of people beating down the door for an offer. putting in an offer on this one, and so they were smart to take the deal. I think that they got all the money that they could have gotten out of this house at 1.62.
And a total trend you'll see in homes with less desirable locations, the finishes and the interior will be typically more updated and more eye-catching to kind of come up for that shortfall. So on the whole rubric conversation, if location is a hard requirement, you wouldn't find yourself getting emotionally drawn to this home because it is pretty eye-catching and interesting once you go see it.
Well, I remember when our clients booked this one, I almost wanted to call them and say, we shouldn't go see this house. Because all that can happen is you talk yourself into it. And it's going to show really well. It did. I mean, and it artistically too. But it's just that compromised location. Busy streets are limited in their upside potential, even if you can stomach the constant traffic going by. And the traffic noise.
Yeah.
But we hadn't seen our clients in a while, and I wanted to see them, so that's why I remember going to the showing.
I think that was one of our 4 snow days we've had during the winter too, because we met up and shared some data and stuff. Yeah. But
okay, Amish, we got to pick up the pace because we are at an hour 43, and this is our last sale of the week, and we still have to talk about some really hot topic items, the Boulder Valley Comp Plan in particular. So let's hit on our last one, 2815 11th Street. It is a ranch without a basement, sort of a rambling ranch, and it sold for 1.595, so just under 1.6. Had been on the market 42 days in this listing period before they got an offer. And it sold for 1.595, so $55,000 below the list price. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, built in the 40s, so pre-war, which creates increased risk of
flag
city
historic
review causing problems on any future modifications. And with 8,000 square feet, likely the seller is going to want to make some modifications. But the part that I found really fascinating about this listing is that it faces south directly into the Alpine Balsam development. So in order to get comfortable about it, either the buyers didn't know, and I don't know how you not know because it's under construction, or they really got into the plans, right? They looked at the plans and they said, hey, in the future, this house is going to, maybe it has a great view. Maybe there's a view corridor through this spot, and they're actually going to take advantage of that because 1.6 for this location, other than the fact it's Alpine Balsam,
large,
right? Like if it had been on the other side of North Boulder Park or one block to the north, almost irrelevant. But because it fronts on the Alpine Balsam development, it drove down the value. So 1.6 is a pretty darn good deal for this house. 4 bedrooms, all on the main, 3 baths, decent square footage, 2,000 square feet. I think it likely had an addition already, looking at the design of the house.
It definitely looks that way. 1940s to begin, sure, but I bet you the 70s saw some things.
Yeah, well, the 70s saw these cabinets. I don't think these are the original cabinets, but holy cow, are they dated. And so are almost every finish in this house is looking really dated. So it's almost like the value of this is the 8,000 square foot lot, not the house itself.
That's my read. Mm-hmm.
But the risk is 1940s construction, and if you're buying it for dirt, you really better make sure you have a demo permit as a condition of sale, because you could find yourself, it's not that hard to get a demo permit, it takes some time, and you could find yourself really hurt financially. Up a creek, something for jumping on this without understanding the limitations of and what historic review is like. But congrats to the seller. I think this is another one of those things where they got all the money. 1.6 million. I think this location now allows for duplexes and triplexes, so maybe that's the future. But I think they got all the money on this. I have a hard time imagining a primary home buyer going for 1.6 with the dated finishes of this thing. But, I mean, we'll find out. Yeah. Don't be surprised to see it look radically different in a few years.
It's something we'll keep our eye out for.
I mean, if you scrape it and build a triplex right? You started at 1.6, and each of those units could be $2 million a piece. You're away laughing. You've made it back, yeah.
So keep our eye out. We'll watch it. We're here keeping our pulse on the market. And with that shameless self-promotion, lovely listener, you might have something up your sleeve. One of our longest time clients and at this point close friends of ours is continuing their search for I want a large but not too large ranch. Not on a corner lot. Doesn't need a whole lot of maintenance. Is not a fixer-upper, but doesn't have to be perfect. The biggest one is we would like levelness. So as little stairs anywhere as possible. And Osman, you will put this into real estate agent terms.
No, I think you covered the basics there, and it's what I consider kind of the Goldilocks house, right? It can't be too big, it can't be too small. It needs to be more or less turnkey, but maybe some work. It doesn't have to be perfect. Reasonably priced for the location, basically anywhere in Boulder. Should have a level lot. And then there's some bonus things, like if there's space to park an RV, that's great, but not a requirement. And if it's priced right, or you're willing to sell it for fair value, reach out to us because we've got the perfect buyer, a very reasonable buyer with a lot of integrity and is happy to pay fair value for the house. We're just struggling to find this Goldilocks size. Typically, they're just too big. Or they're just too small, right? It's this middle zone, and with a 2-car garage minimum is just it's just been challenging now this is our second year of, I think, seriously looking and struggling to find the right house.
And I'd say too, like, hesitant to put square footage numbers on it because that's so layout dependent, right? How much of the square footage is caught up in the living room versus the bedrooms or anything like that. So I think Goldilocks is the way to describe it. Not too big, not too large, not too small.
All right. Well, I think it's time for us to talk about the news and give you some hot takes.
Boy, oh boy. I don't I don't want to make any hot takes on this first topic.
Well, I feel like we want to at least acknowledge what is happening in the rest of the world with the war in Iran and both the loss of our service members, the loss of civilians, and honestly the loss of young Iranian soldiers too. Like, I don't think celebrating the killing of those humans that are also just doing their jobs is really something to feel good about. And the turmoil in the energy markets, the economic uncertainty it's created, the attacks on other Gulf state countries. It's a big, giant mess. And the future I think I hope for is one that involves peace and bringing Iran and the Iranian people, the Persian culture back online and with the rest of our civilization, because they have an amazing history, thousands of years of civilization, incredibly well educated, and they've been North Korea'd out of alignment with most of the rest of the world. And isolated states like that are really dangerous. And there's no point in us second guessing the decisions that have been made. But I do hope that it resolves quickly and with some sort of secular democracy in place in Iran that frees women and religious minorities and people that also aren't cisgendered to live their lives in freedom. Like, I would love to see Iran be part of the world fold again. But it's not. So who knows where we're going as a world with what's happening in Iran, but it's something that obviously everyone pays a lot of attention to and feels a lot of heartache over.
Seeing the pictures of Tehran, I think it is, with the black smoke, and where it's like the sun is just entirely blotted out, and you hear about like the black rain and everything. I mean, it's really difficult news to watch and hear about.
I mean, the school girls, 175 or something, that were obliterated by what appears to be a U.S. strike. I mean, who knows what is real and what's propaganda? Okay, like
that too. All the news that's coming around.
This is the problem: is we don't even know what's real anymore because of AI and video generation being available to anybody. That it could easily be a fake video. So who really knows what happened? I mean, it's just not even worth talking about anymore. Other than I hope this situation resolves quickly.
But we're here and we're human too. We're not just talking about real estate as though nothing else is in the world, I think is what we're getting at.
I mean, one thing's for sure, I just don't believe partisan news, whether it's either side, the left or the right. It's too, they're constantly in spin mode. So I it's just a very difficult and upsetting situation. All right, but there is real estate impacts. And as we alluded to earlier, when people are uncertain about their economic future or there's a war breaking out, it creates uncertainty, and that creates an aversion to risk. And so it's likely to have a dampening effect on the real estate market. Real estate assets are very high dollar for the majority of people. So for savvy buyers, and I'm not telling you to take advantage of this, but for savvy buyers, you could potentially lock in a really great rate or have less competition for a home that would otherwise get a bidding war. So if you're able to navigate through this type of environment and still make big decisions, you could see some benefits from this uncertainty. And of course, we're willing and happy to work with you, but at the same time, it feels important to acknowledge the heaviness of what's happening in the world.
Yeah, and not at all glossing over how dark all this is, right? But yes, absolutely, and we, have had buyers find themselves with favorable rates with all this turmoil. So,
all right, let's talk about the Boulder Valley Comp Plan. And in the interest of time, we're going to kind of gut through this a little faster than I normally would have, and this may be a multi-episode topic.
For sure, right? This is the draft, and it'll develop.
This is the draft that's been floated. The comp plan is a partnership between the city and the county, and it sets basically the vision for what our community is going to look like by establishing zoning or setting goals for sustainability. And it's difficult to look at it without an analysis of how it's changed, which is a perfectly great use case for AI. And I asked Claude, to the latest model, 4.6, to look at the old plan, the one that was approved in, I think the last one was 2021, which was a midterm plan, and look at the latest draft and tell me how the plan is changing. And the analysis, I think we can go ahead and share a link to this in the show notes, because anybody with the link can then see it. And I think you just see it, right, Hamish? You don't see all my other chats, right?
No, I don't.
Randomness.
Wait, do I see your prompt? Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so it starts with a little sycophant behavior. It says, "What a great deep dive topic for the podcasts."
You're so smart.
And I uploaded both plans, so I asked it to really compare them. And it says, here's my analysis. There's a lot to unpack. Some of it's going to be very relevant for your clients and your podcast content. How nice of you. Okay. The biggest takeaway, this isn't a tune-up, it's a reimagining. And it said the old plan, the 2021 midterm plan, was essentially an update to the 2015 plan with incremental tweaks, not twerks. The 2026 draft is a ground-up rewrite of the plan's structure, language, land use framework, and philosophical orientation. First, it's a complete overhaul of the land use framework. So the old plan had 20 granular land use designations: very low density residential, medium density residential, high density, on and on and on. And the new plan consolidates all of that into just 12 designations and 4 classes: neighborhoods 1 and 2, hubs, which are community, regional, innovation, and production hubs, systems, which are parks, greenways, open space, and rural land, and special purpose, which are industrial facilities and the university. And AI says it's a massive simplification. The old low-density residential is now neighborhood 1, which explicitly supports detached units, attached units, ground living, multi-unit housing, and small-scale commercial, all within the same designation. Okay.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's crazy. But people want neighborhood coffee shops. That sounds like what that is, right?
Yeah. There's a picture on the comp plan of somebody's garage being a coffee shop.
Yeah, I mean, that's such wishful thinking if you know how much it costs to have a commercial hood and a commercial kitchen. Okay, right. The transition area concept is entirely new. So there's a 100-foot transition zone on either side of boundaries between these designations where they might just ignore the harder to meet zoning rules and go with the easy ones because it creates a transition zone.
Right. That I thought was an interesting little thing to see there.
Okay, so here's number 3. Equity moves from a footnote to the headline. In the old plan, social equity appeared occasionally, mostly in the sustainability and resilience framework. The new plan leads with the number 1 policy goal of equity, racial justice, and social resilience, including a full land acknowledgement, with specific historical references to the Sand Creek Massacre and Boulder's role. Okay, and it applies racial equity assessments to all land use designations for the first time, and commits to dismantling institutional and systemic racism in explicit terms. The community engagement section describes the first ever community assembly, 48 randomly selected members using a representative model, a notable experiment in deliberative democracy for Boulder. Okay. I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't even know what the representative model is.
Okay. So the old plan mentioned 15-minute neighborhoods. The new plan makes it part of our formal policy, devoting an entire section to the concept. The old plan referenced an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 and 100% renewable electricity by 2030. The new plan targets net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. That's 15 years sooner than the previous target and extremely ambitious. The housing targets. The old plan had a general policy about encouraging affordable housing. The new plan sets that 15% concrete goal, which we've already had, by 2035. Currently, we're at 8.9%. We've talked about that before. Mm-hmm. The plan also notes the dramatic shift towards rental-only affordable production. 95% rental, 5% ownership, which is worth flagging, which is something we've complained about repeatedly. New economic policy areas. There's policies for a night economy, an experiential economy. There's also new imagination areas that encourage locations for unconventional architecture and creative rule bending. What does that mean? I don't think even the people who wrote this knew what that means, but it's in there. I double checked to make sure Claude wasn't hallucinating. Right. It is item number 102.
And on that note too, like I read through most of this. I know Osmond has too, and we're pretty confident with Claude's representation of this, but we are going to link it all as well. So
right,
and there's probably and check it out.
There's probably errors in here. The vision statement shifts from preservation to belonging. Here's the old vision statement. The Boulder Valley community honors its history and legacy of planning for a livable community surrounded by open space and rural land while striving together to create and preserve a truly special place. And here's the new vision statement. Our community works together to ensure everyone belongs, to create opportunities for all, and to sustain the health of the Boulder Valley for future generations. So it's a shift from preserve a special place to ensure everyone belongs. So we're focusing on inclusion over preservation, which I don't agree with. And I'll just be upfront. I've joked about this, that if I ever ran for office in Boulder, it would be under the slogan that Boulder is full, go home. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course. Yeah. Change is bad with Locus and Amber. But everyone belongs puts an enormous amount of pressure on our community to basically allow people to camp everywhere you want. Everyone belongs.
I don't know if that's going to... I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, everyone belongs, Hamish.
True. I don't know. There's a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, everyone belongs. And then they're still like, busting homeless camps and stuff too. Lip service, right?
I just don't know if everyone belongs. And that's the part that I think I struggle with, is that there are some people I could tell you, like, let me put it this way, right? Inclusion is so important. And we know quite a few people that would be very upset if their neighbor was a Trump supporter, right? Like, do Trump supporters belong? Do conservatives belong? Right? And I'm not...
I mean, that's all protected stuff.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's what inclusion really means. If you really want everyone to belong, it means people whose opinions you don't agree with. And then there's this question of, when is Boulder full? How large of a city do we really want? And that, I think, is enough of the comp plan analysis. Let's move to Steve Pomerantz, who talked about that specifically, and it's currently the number one news
Did you call
article.
him the Grouch? Or
I say he's a little curmudgeon-y, okay? Like, that's how he's perceived. I didn't want to share that on the pod, Hamish, because I don't generally speak negative. It's fine. Let's leave it in there. I think he's perceived that way. A little grumpy, a little bit conservative, so that aligns with people that think he's a little curmudgeon-y. I think that that's probably a fair assessment of how people feel about him. I don't know him personally. I've never met him or talked to him. I did ask him for comment about this because of what he wrote in this, and he did respond, actually, so we'll get to that. Oh. So last week, February 21st, actually, a couple weeks ago, he wrote about the same thing I had a video about, which was the annexation of the Area 3 Planning Reserve, and how that's estimated to add thousands of new units and enormous numbers of new people living in Boulder. And it was City Council ignoring the vote of their own planning reserve to move ahead with that, and could potentially see 20,000 new units. No, sorry, that's that's a different number.
It's like 30. Okay.
Well, a huge number of new. I think it's like 8,000 new units and 20,000 new residents, I think, is what the city staff has determined is possible in the planning reserve. But this piece by Steve goes beyond that. He talks about 27 projects at various stages, totaling over 15,000 new units are currently in the works. And this could potentially increase to 20,000 new units because of densification allowed under the Big, Beautiful, Vibrant Neighborhood Ordinance, which passed last year. And Steve goes on to say Boulder has over 47,000 units, so 20,000 more represents a 42% increase and potentially about a 40% increase in population. So he goes further into the planning reserve, which is 8,700 more units. Okay, that's the number. And if the airport gets developed, that could add 2,000 units. So that's a total of 20,000 plus 8,700 plus 2,000 equals 30,700 more units, a 65% increase, which could bring our population to 167,000. And he goes on to say that that's a massive increase, and our streets are already congested. On every expedition I take to Boulder's commercial denser areas during the weekdays, I end up waiting multiple light cycles at least one intersection. I agree, that's true. But don't expect new development. Yeah, for sure. At most intersections, at least one intersection, there's multiple light cycles before I get through.
My beef is with the people on their phones at the turn lanes that don't go, and the turn lights are short. Sorry, but
I mean, the turn lanes are overrun into the lane that goes straight. There's not enough space in the turn lane to accommodate all the cars that are trying to turn left. So it ends up taking 2 light cycles to get through, which is okay. I mean, I just planned for it.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So Steve is really, really aggressive in this article, in my opinion, but he might be right. He also talks about water, which is something we talked about in that piece. And he says that according to analysis previously done by the city's water utility, we're already close to crisis mode where we must cut back usage like 30%, which includes outdoor watering, but limitations on interior domestic use would likely be in the pipeline, so to speak. Okay. And he goes on about water budgets, and he finalizes this with 60% more people, 30% more water, 30% less water. That's our progressive future, thanks but no thanks. And so I think that, on one end of this are the everyone belongs people, and then on the other end of this are the thanks but no thanks people, and it's a really interesting time. But clearly, with release of this comp plan, the city and the county are telling you where they're planning to take us, and it's a draft. It's still in play. Hamish, where do you fall in? I fall somewhere in the middle. Okay, I'm not as hard.
Me too.
Conservative as Steve, and I'm certainly not a everyone belongs, let's build it till we can't fit any more people in our city. I think that we're approaching build out under the existing ways of people getting around our community. And unless there are ways that we can move people efficiently and have grocery stores within these neighborhoods that make sense, adding more and more people to the way our city is currently designed is just a recipe for decreasing quality of life. And there needs to be an intelligent discussion of where our optimal size is for the design of our city. And we're just not having that. We're having these two extreme conversations where everyone belongs, build it to just keep building, right? Let's not even ask ourselves what the number is. And then you have Steve on the other end of this, which is saying 60% more people, 30% less water. That's not acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Oh, man, I had it, and then
and you don't have to have
I almost want to have
It's
this printed out in front of me to get the whole picture of it, right? But I understand. I think growth is inevitable. Like, it's fun to say don't come here, but tough on that. 15-minute neighborhoods too are the kind of their answer for working with congestion and lowering things, which also you need infrastructure to provide a lifeline to those 15-minute neighborhoods. So there's kind of some logistical challenges rather than just saying a 15-minute neighborhood it won't be congested because all this housing is just going to be entirely self-contained. Boulder's known for its open space, so people are going to want to travel to that open space even if they're living in this 15-minute neighborhood. I do like the idea I think Boulder's got the right intention, but they're doing a little bit too much, trying to make this right intention come to fruition. They've got the right idea, it is nice to be inclusive, it is nice to kind of do these things, but you don't have to be doing all this in one 10-year push. You can kind of feel things out and be a little bit more conservative in your approach to growing and expanding. 55th and Arapahoe hasn't yet hit. All of those new housing units haven't hit. The impact from that hasn't been felt. And we're already earmarking new development. Maybe we wait and see what that's going to look like and take some lessons from that before, redoing or reworking the plan. I'm with you. I'm somewhere in the middle. I do like the idea of that. Also, water is a total thing. That's why I've been covering the Chimney Hollow Reservoir and everything like that. Because, since I've been in school, you hear about this impending water shortage. That's going to happen, no matter where we are. But it is a real concern, and especially the eastern slopes water supply. My answer and my take is rambling, as you can tell.
You're not rambling. I'm listening.
Yeah.
You're not rambling. I want to give you plenty of space to share your feelings on this, and I honestly feel like staff is trying to leverage the feelings of guilt that people who are affluent and successful, or just been lucky to have been born in an affluent family, or family that has owned real estate in Boulder for decades, they're trying to leverage that guilt with everyone belongs. And it sounds nice. It sounds like it aligns with your value system. Because it's something you should learn in kindergarten, right? You shouldn't exclude the one kid from the sports team. Everyone belongs, and everyone gets a participation medal for showing up. But the reality is we have a constrained resource of land and a design of a city that is not intended or ever contemplated as many people that currently live here, much less what it will look like if you add 30,000. Let's take Steve's number and half it. You add 30,000, what will our city look like and feel like with the way people currently live? And how will that impact the housing market? And I think we need to be realistic and honest with ourselves. Let me just wrap this one thought. Mm-hmm. And that is, not everyone belongs. Okay? When I worked in Manhattan in my 20s, I didn't belong in Manhattan from a living perspective because I refused to pay the price of living in Manhattan. I lived in Brooklyn. And not only did I live in Brooklyn, I lived in affordable housing in Brooklyn that I got connected with through my sister. And I don't even know if I qualified. There seemed to be some shenanigans because I had to hand the super cash to get that apartment. Okay, so that's how that worked. There was fraud, and it was a bribe, and I didn't know better. I was young and desperate for housing. And I paid a month's rent in a cash paper bag to the super in order to get that apartment. And I've never really spent a lot of time thinking about that, but that's just an example of the type of corruption that occurs when housing gets so constrained. But I never, in the wildest sense of, in my dreams, felt like somebody owed me something to live in Manhattan. I couldn't afford it, and I wasn't willing to pay the rent. And today,
it's
right,
always had that reputation too, right? Like New York.
You live in the boroughs.
That's kind of what you think about it. You're like,
it's expensive,
I'm not going to.
It's small.
Yeah.
But am I entitled to demand that everyone belongs in Midtown or in the Village or the Upper West Side? Of course not. But how about today? Does everyone belong in Aspen? Does everyone belong in Jackson Hole? Does everyone belong in West Hollywood? Like, or whatever the neighborhoods are, right? The Bay Area. Does everyone belong? And the answer is, of course not. Like, these are scarce resources, and we really wish we could allow everyone to experience Boulder's beauty, but we don't have enough Boulder to go around for everyone to belong. And I think we just need to have an adult conversation about a scarce resource and balance preservation with inclusion. And a 15% goal for affordable housing is extremely noble, but a goal that everyone belongs is a recipe for the destruction of our city. And I think we need to nip it in the bud now and go back to council and say, no, I'm sorry, this philosophy of everyone belonging is going to destroy our community if we insist on it.
I think as well, and not as an argument against what you're saying, but more of like a reality of that, though, is when you're in areas that are more expensive to live, you expect everything else to go up too. Like we've talked about, like trade workers' costs and the cost to get plumbing and stuff done in Boulder being absurdly high. Well, that's what you're going to pay for. You know, these tradespeople can't afford to live here. They have to commute in. You're going to be paying that tax. That's a reality of this limited resource, and I'm not necessarily advocating against it or for it, but these things come with the trade-offs too, right?
Right. I mean, 100%. It increases the cost, right? The exclusivity and the rarity of Boulder increases its cost, and you should expect to pay more for everything. Yeah. Like we're paying, and every time we go to a restaurant in Boulder, and there's like, all right, in addition to paying 20% tip, I noticed there's a 3 or 5 or 6% like community service charge that snuck onto the bill. I'm like, that was like the libertarian in me, and the one that's fiscally conservative gets a little annoyed at the sneaky tax. But then I look at my server and I'm like, she's trying to make a living here. And I think about the staff behind the house, and they're trying to make a living. And if I can't afford to pay those things, I should just not go out to eat in Boulder. But I'm not going to withhold that 20% tip or the community service charge, because that's the price of living in Boulder and eating out in Boulder. Don't like it, don't eat out in Boulder. Really short answer. And so not everyone deserves to eat in Boulder, right? And unfortunately, or maybe not deserves, or maybe not everyone can afford to live in Boulder and eat in Boulder, and that's the reality. But this sort of sneaky philosophy that they've snuck in here is very much intended to play upon our heartstrings and make us feel guilty, because we really want everyone to belong. We want everyone to be getting their participation award, but not everyone gets that in life. That's reality, and we need to have a real honest conversation about it.
I'm all for participation awards, but yeah, it's a separate tangent.
All right.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think we're pretty on board.
All right, I think we've beaten this up enough. I probably am going to get some angry responses to this, but I just feel like we need to be realistic, and it's important to be honest with ourselves as a community, and also call out staff when they're trying to manipulate us with this type of languaging.
The guilt trips.
I'm particularly sensitive to being guilt tripped. I grew up being guilt tripped, and I'm so sensitive to when people are trying to guilt trip me that I get very emotionally reactive.
You're ready to go. Yeah,
I'm ready to let's
You've been debating this your whole life. Yeah,
right. I've been fighting this since I was 6 years old. I'm ready for the guilt trip battle.
Yeah.
All right, let's hit this last news piece, and that is too many schools, too few students. And the Boulder Reporting Lab has a great article about something that we've been hearing about for the last few months, and that is that certain schools are on the chopping block, including Heatherwood, which we've told some of our clients that have been shopping in Heatherwood that have small children that, look, there's a really good chance Heatherwood Elementary is going to close. And there are other elementaries that are also likely to close. And it's going to have a large effect on the attractiveness of those locations to people with elementary school aged children, because they no longer are walking to the neighborhood school. They are being driven on a bus or a family member's car or a bicycle, unlikely but possible. That's what's likely happening, and it is going to have a real estate impact. So we're paying very close attention to this. Rumors have not been confirmed. Supposedly district leaders say that decisions have not been finalized, but Flatirons, Heatherwood, Cole, and El Dorado are currently below 50% capacity. And Flatirons, Heatherwood, and Community Montessori and Mesa have fewer than 1.5 classes per grade. And there are additional schools expected to reach low capacity by 2030, which include Coal Creek, Columbine, Creekside, which they just built a new school, Crestview, Douglas, Eisenhower, Louisville, Monarch, Sanchez, Uni Hill, and Whittier. So buyers just need to be aware of it and understand that that's a potential risk in the near future, and frankly fight it, because this is my take on this. I think small schools are better for educating, and I think some of the data in this article supports that. So fewer students per teacher, pay the teachers more. We certainly are paying a lot more in our property taxes, so why can't we support these schools? I don't quite understand that disconnect, and that's my hot take on this article.
Yeah, I'm kind of want to, I don't know, I'm in Jefferson County, and the school next to me has been shut down and is slated, I think it's already sold to a developer, and there's the local community trying to push back it getting developed. The middle school, also less than a mile from me, has just closed down, and I got a email here from Jefferson County School Board with a list of what they're calling surplused properties that no longer have a use. You know, the student count's too low and everything, and I think it is a very short-sighted action to sell these properties and get them off of the school board's ownership. Populations fluctuate. The birth rate is down now. We're going to be screwed if we develop more and have less available schools to pick up the slack. You know, there's a war in Iran. We had a baby boomer thing during the last World War, you know, that happened. It's very possible we can have another baby boom. I think, it's short-sighted to be getting rid of these properties. These are assets. They're schools. They kind of really only get built once or twice, and we're selling them to get them developed. Let's hold on to that shiz, you know?
I mean, I hear you, Hamish. I'm in radical agreement. Selling schools is wrong, and declining enrollment is, a function of people having fewer babies, as well as how expensive it is to live in Colorado. But here's the disconnect. We're paying more in property taxes. Why are we selling schools? Why do we care that it's great that teachers in Boulder Valley School District are getting paid $95,000 a year on average. I want it to be $125,000 a year. I think that we can actually afford it, because there's a disconnect happening between the taxes being collected and how our school district and our politicians are making decisions around actual physical schools and actually paying teachers right. And it's so weird how easy it is for them to upgrade schools. Like they upgraded Creekside, they rebuilt the entire school.
New Vista?
This is and New Vista too.
Yeah.
Somehow it's okay to sell bonds and build these massive buildings, but it's not enough to pay our teachers more. And then declining enrollment is an excuse to sell the buildings. There's something wrong with how the school district is working, and I don't understand it. I completely admit I'm just flabbergasted. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it seems like we're going to be coming to a head over this, because people really care about neighborhood schools. It's a big deal for a lot of people.
There's a pressure, I think, for public institutions to operate like a business, and I really think schools and the school system should be insulated from that. Like you said, with property taxes and bonds and everything to fund things, I'm having a hard time seeing these buildings be so expensive to upkeep that they can't hold on to them until enrollment increases or find alternative uses. Like, shit, guys, team up with the local rec center, host classes there, utilize these spaces. They're a massive benefit even in their vacancy. Like the police force uses the Zerger Elementary School by me all the time for active shooter drills. Super dark, but hell yeah, at least the building's getting used, you know? I'm just, it's like, what are we going to do the schools don't they come? They're a rare asset, and you're selling them.
I know.
You know,
It's wrong. I'm with you.
yeah.
All right, Hamish, let's move on to our carve-outs so we can wrap up this pod, because we are pushing 2.5 hours, which maybe you were right. Maybe we had too much on this podcast. But carve-outs are the time when we talk about anything we'd like to talk about. And it may or may not be real estate related. Hamish, do you want to lead?
Yeah, sure can. So I talked about the Pokemon card craze thing, and like baseball cards and all sorts of other trading cards and things have always been kind of like a collector thing, and it seems like anything that is anything these days has some sort of weird collector niche to it. There's people collecting like Funko Pops, which are like our weird little figurine. I just don't understand it at all. I mean, the prediction markets, maybe that's a whole different podcast, but that it all feels very similar to that. And there's a lot of like folks like Logan Paul, who's leading this like Pokemon card hype and just made a record-breaking sale on a Pikachu card. I think he got a couple million for it. Nevertheless, when I was like 8 or 9 and visiting my grandparents here in the States, every time we visited Target, Grandpa would get me a little Pokemon cards pack. And I would pretty much immediately take those Pokemon cards and put them into a binder. And I was like, they're cool now, and I'll play with them when I'm back in New Zealand lightly. And then if they're worth something down the road, great. If they're not, oh no, I still got a little bit of enjoyment out of them. And I had a buddy recently, and I kind of chid him. I'm like, dude, this is gambling. Like, you're buying Pokemon cards for the goal of reselling them on the chance that you get like a good one. Like, you're gambling here. But it did, I was like, okay, you know what? It's been enough time. Maybe the cards that I've got still have some value. And sure enough, I had a Pikachu that is worth quite a decent amount. I took it out, like put it in like a collector's case and all these things. And there was a crease on the back, which supposedly impacts value and all these things. I think there's a lot of parallels with like the buyer strategic fallacies and kind of the emotional and social proof stuff that we've been talking about in this podcast. But this Pikachu ungraded is worth roughly $2,500 or so. And a mint one goes for, I think last sold for 50 grand. And then a perfect, barely even out of the package one sold for, I think, 150 grand. So a very rare Pikachu. And I'm not even going to try to argue the value, but that's what it's selling for.
So
my
were you
philosophy.
Excited? Were you
I was,
excited
to be honest with you, man, I'm kind of like, I definitely had it out holding it, which at this card and the value is like a no-no to even be touching it. And I'm just like, WTF was kind of like my big thing. And like, it's wonky. But I went to a card show, which was packed. It's an industry of its own. And I got it looked at and things, and the first offer I got was for $1,800, and then I took it to another vendor, and there were some lessons that I wish I'd known before I went to a vendor in a card show, but I ended up selling it for a very decent chunk, more than $1,800, and I brought some other cards that I'd just from quick Googles valued at like decent money, $20 a card or so, and I walked away very happy. There is this nagging in the back of my head that's like, oh, what if you held on to it? What if you got it graded? What if you did this? What if you did that? But there's also a lot of comfort in being like, no, it's sold. I'm done. I'm out of it. If it goes up, it goes up. If it goes down, it goes down. But it was at a price that I was happy with. And I'm not gambling with cards anymore. Like, it could be worth a lot more money, sure, but that cash and that liquidity, I think I can make more value out of it elsewhere, and that's what I plan to do. So I have a friend who's really upset with me. He's like, even if it had that crease, the value's going up, like I don't even really want to like talk to you anymore, like, and he said it kind of jokingly, like, we're fine, but there are people that get really invested in this stuff, and that's not me. I did sell it to someone who I think actually very much is gonna like treasure this card. It was funny, he was the vendor there with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend's like here nor there, but like fake nails, like an inch and a half long. And he's like, babe, check out this card. And she grabs it, and I can see her nails like cutting into the card. And I'm like, oh, and he immediately like grabs them away from her because she doesn't know how to like hold the card to damage it. But yeah, made out pretty good on that. The whole being 9 years old and putting cards in a binder thing turned out to work for a little bit. And yeah, it was just a nice little bump. But I generally am fairly cautious of this stuff, and I don't have really an urge to go buy a new pack of cards on the off chance I get some legendary card worth a couple grand. Like, it just, to me, that's gambling. And that's my Carveout. I yeah.
All right. I mean, I don't really understand this obsession over Pokemon cards. It's not my generation. My generation collected baseball cards when I was in elementary school. And I had some back in the day, and I even then I was like, I don't really follow why I'm doing this, and I'm sure they're still sitting in a box in my parents' house today. I doubt they ever did anything with them. Maybe they're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Probably not, but maybe. I'll have to go looking for those. Down payment. Yeah. Next time I go visit my parents. But my Carveout is completely different, and it involves what I call van life versus the real world. And I own a adventure van that is a lifted 4x4 with a camper top. And it's something we use a couple times a year on trips, and it's a labor of love to work on it and keep it. But it's also really time consuming, and I've got so many other things going on. When I was in college, when I went to grad school, my MBA program, one of my professors was William Danko. And he is an author of a book called The Millionaire Next Door. And The Millionaire Next Door...
You're joking.
I read The Millionaire Next Door, before I had him as a professor. And,
that's great.
And one of the things that I remember about the way that they chopped up the world of poor accumulators of wealth and prodigious accumulators of wealth. And one of the things that really made clear was at a certain point in time, you stop being a do-it-yourselfer. And so this van needs like the suspension swapped out. It's got a vacuum leak somewhere that's tripping the emissions. And it's like, I've got a great shop. I visited them. They told they could fix all this stuff. And they quoted me reasonable rates. And I'm still hesitant to do it because the work isn't that difficult. But at the same time, if I take the time that I'm going to monkey with this van, let's call it 4 or 5 hours, they can get it done in half that time. And their hourly rate, when I think about my hourly rate for the value I want to create, right? So one of the ideas is that if you take your income level or your aspirational income level and figure out what your hourly rate is on the basis of that, my hourly rate is like 5 times what their hourly rate is. And that's the value I want to create in every hour of productive work I do. And so
in life experience.
Right? And in life experience too, right? It's not just your time working. And so it's just a no-brainer to take it to the shop. But man, the fighting it is so interesting. And I'm like, God, don't be an idiot. Just take it to the shop. But I remember this book, and I remember William Danko and how these lessons are still really relevant today. Of course, they're not the same price point, so you could look at it like some of the summary ideas on Wikipedia. But one thing I would like to mention to you, Hamish, is that under accumulators of wealth typically buy new, may have financed cars on credit. They often are
trading Pokemon cards.
They are more likely to own foreign or luxury vehicles if they're under accumulators of wealth, because people that are prodigious accumulators of wealth rarely buy new cars and are less likely to own foreign or luxury vehicles. And they even go into the amount of time that these people would spend studying which car to buy or not buy. So anyway, it's a super interesting study. And of course, our friend, well, he's not really our friend, but he's somebody I aspirationally wish was my friend. Professor Taleb criticizes the book on the basis of survivorship bias. But whatever. He could be right too.
Got a point. Dang it.
It's sort of like chicken soup for the soul for people that want to, reflect on their personal use of time and money. It's a worthy book and a good reminder. So the van's going to the shop tomorrow. I'm not working on it.
as a DIYer, I mean, I'm with you. There are certain jobs where it's like, I'm not going to get that success or that life value or anything out of it other than like, this is simply better in other hands. And then there's others, I'm planning on doing the brakes. I'm like, brakes, yeah, I've done them on this car. I know how to do it. I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Brakes
then,
are easy.
You know, yeah.
Brakes
and
are quick and easy.
It's like, yeah. I outsourced the wiper assembly, the wiper motor assembly, which includes the removal of the hood and all of the cowling and a bunch of crap. I'm like, yeah, no, that's going out, you know.
Right.
But other times I am too militantly DIY, and it's striking that balance.
I still do my own oil changes because the time it takes to do an oil change in my driveway is less than the time it takes to go to the shop and back. And that's the decisive factor. Plus, those quickie lube places are likely to damage your vehicle and have in my past experience. So basic stuff like oil changes, I'm just going to do. But for more complicated stuff that involves, like for this particular project, swapping out the shocks is going to involve two people because I need somebody to hold, like there's a heavy torque levels and it's hard to get the leverage. It's going to be easier if I have a helper based on how the bolts are aligned, which means I got to get my wife to do it, which has an additional financial cost.
Tax.
She would do it. Okay, she's such a lovely and
she would
engaged,
100%,
capable human. The van's also sitting on 35s. Okay, so now I've got to lift the van and drop the suspension, which means a really tall lift. I've actually got it that can lift it from the body. I checked it, but it's also like, oh man, like this is just not worth the effort in terms of the return. So to the shop it goes.
And with it, you've brought up this before, probably last year, I think, when I was doing the mini split. And it's something I've been kicking around. So, listeners, this topic may be revisited again.
Yeah. Do it yourself, do it right, and how does that relate to your use of time doing other things, including free time, adventure time, playtime, versus time invested in your business, time invested in your profession, time invested in becoming a master at what you do. Probably better to focus on your wheelhouse. There's this one point in time, and I think it's roughly around 30 years old, where I think your level of wanting to do DIY starts to drop, and you need to be focused on
your back
things
pain.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily
No,
back
I'm kidding.
pain related, but anyway, there you go. So thank you, dear listeners. You have squandered another 2.5 hours with us today at the House Einstein podcast. We deeply appreciate your feedback, your listening and watching it on various channels. If you liked what you heard today, check us out at houseeinstein.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can also visit our other social media on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and X, at Blue Sky and LinkedIn. And of course, the House Einstein website. We're always here for you when you're ready to buy or sell real estate. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can reach out to us about that. And thanks again for all your feedback. Hamish, any last things you want to say?
We love you.
All right, that's very sweet. That is very sweet. All right, we'll catch you next time.